budget workshop to order. I knew that was coming. I will take a motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Barbara?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Dan?
Yep.
And Ricky. Is Ricky not
He's
on?
not on.
Okay. Did he remember? I wonder.
Probably outstanding.
Probably. I'll shoot him a quick text, but on that we'll get rocking and rolling. Anthony, do you want to read your overview? You wanna?
Yeah, I'm just going to touch on a few high points on the first couple of pages that are in your package. Just an update from me. So today was the first day for our new full-time position of code enforcement and building maintenance. And we've done something a little bit unusual in how we budgeted this. So he's going to work 3 days a week as code enforcement and 2 days a week as building maintenance. And so he'll be earning different wages in each of those jobs. And so we actually budgeted for 16 hours in building maintenance at a rate of $16 per hour, and 27 hours per week at $23 for code enforcement. So he's starting off at $20 an hour. As he earns each of the 5 certifications we need him to earn, we will increase his pay by $1 per hour. And we budgeted the 27 hours. I know that does not add up to 40 hours, but we budgeted that so that to allow for the longer planning board meetings that sometimes extend into Thursday evenings. And so if he were to work, let's say 10 hours on a Thursday, we would reduce his building maintenance hours by 2 hours the following day. So we're open to suggestions about that, but we just want to make sure that he has the time that he needs in order to fully devote to the code position. He is
Yeah, I did
not
turn it
taking town benefits, but nonetheless, we budgeted 75% of the cost of a benefits package, just in case in a couple of months he says, this is not for me, and so that if we have to hire someone else who is going to take advantage of the benefits package, then we do have that budget. And actually have a wrong figure in here. We're proposing a $6,000 expenditure as opposed to $6,500 for a code enforcement software package. And we think this would greatly increase his efficiency because a lot of his reporting can be done actually in the field, taking photos with the tablet and doing all his report and actually sending permits and notices to applicants, permit applicants or permit holders from the field.
From the field.
And so we do so that $6,000 cost involves a $2,500 one-time setup fee, and then a $3,500 annual subscription to the software. This budget also includes a full-time position for custodial that would also probably work at the transfer station, maybe some building maintenance as well. And so we take both of those positions into account. The net effect is one additional full-time position for the town because we the code enforcement officer and building maintenance replaced another full-time employee who has since gone to part-time. In the bullets there, and if anyone has questions along the way, please chime in. But the select board last night did endorse the 2022 paving project. And that's right now at an estimated cost of about $870,000. So, assuming that wins approval tonight, what I'm going to do is send all the information to Bernstein Sure, our bonding attorneys, so that they can start working on the necessary paperwork, and they help with some of the calculations as well. One of the unanswered questions is, as you guys know, we have budgeted $12,000 for general legal services, all of our in-house legal services with Bernstein Sure. But we are proposing another $24,000 in legal costs, split between $12,000 for litigation in the general government budget and $12,000 for planning board litigation, or litigation that springs from planning board matters. Now, that latter thing, we've been told by MMA, we could set up a reserve fund so that if we don't spend those dollars this year, or we spend less than $12,000, they would roll over and carry over into the next fiscal year. But both of those $12,000 for litigation in general government and in the planning board budget.
Anthony, if we don't set up that fund, would that money roll into the unexpended?
That's correct.
Okay,
If it's not spent, and we don't create a reserve fund, then it just rolls over.
roll
to
into the general, okay.
Did you look over past years to see what the expenditures been annually over the
It's
last
been increasing, so that's
every
one-
year?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why, Gary, we set up that legal services contract,
Yeah.
because as long as it's not litigation, then everything else is covered under that $12,000. So hopefully, if we can avoid litigation in the coming years, those are dollars that we're not.
Would you, if you set up a reserve fund, would you put a limit on the reserve fund, or would it just to keep accumulating from year to year?
Well, I think one of the beauties of the reserve fund, Jack, is that we could strategically manage that. So if it got to a point where we felt like it didn't need to go any higher, where we felt comfortable with that, we wouldn't have to put any additional dollars into that fund in that budget year.
Set it up at $12,000 for each, capital $12,000.
Unless it ends up, you know, we need 15,000, you know, as we see how well this works for the next year.
Yeah. Well, and I'm assuming unless it's in a warrant article, no select board is beholden to, you know, decisions of prior select boards. So, you know, this select board may say 12,000 and some future select board may say some other thing.
Yeah, well, we've done that, we've increased.
Right.
things over the years.
I was over here for a second, like, what are you saying? I didn't like that decision they made last year.
And so, and Jack is actually, that question segues perfectly into the next bullet. And that is, you know, we need to decide how we're going to manage the solid waste capital reserve. Now, the transfer station committee has already endorsed, rather than taking unspent monies from the solid waste budget and revenues over what was budgeted, we would strategically manage that, because right now the goal is to get that fund to about $100,000, which would serve us in a worst case scenario involving the hopper. And so, you know, as opposed to sort of depending on any particular year's experience as to what happens with that fund, we could manage it a little bit better by moving undesignated funds into the solid waste capital reserve and having that fund, you know, and it'd be like the legal fund. Some years we may not need it, other years we might need it, and then we would dip into the undesignated fund again to replenish that. So right now, that fund has about $57,000. So we could add $43,000 to that. That would get us to $100,000. But last night, the select board did approve a bid for approximately $19,000 for a container. So we may want to move another $19,000 from the undesignated fund into the solid waste capital reserve, perhaps. And then there's still the question in the draft warrant articles, you will see a warrant article for skid steers at a cost of up to $59,000. And so we would have to decide whether or not we're going to fund that from capital reserve, raise and appropriate, or from the undesignated fund. So we've got options there for how we want to manage that capital purchase. Additionally, we haven't yet made a decision on a fire tower fund, which Chief McKenzie and Chief Burton have proposed with an initial $10,000 appropriation from the undesignated fund. Again, that would cover us if, in the case of a worst case scenario involving our communication tower. And we still, you know, that would grow as we receive the $300 per year from Rome. But, you know, some years we may need it, and some years we may not need to tap into that fund. This is one of the, you know, the recreation budget is one of the things that I think is going to probably be of concern to voters. We went back and we budgeted the operating expenses back to 2019 totals, with a few exceptions, one of them being for our summer music series, which proved to be very popular last year. And in the end, Our non-payroll costs, we were managed to reduce those to only $1,100 more than what our non-payroll costs were in 2019. Nonetheless, we're seeing a lot of growth from the personnel costs because remember, a lot of the workers in that department are minimum wage earners. And in 2019, the minimum wage was $11 versus we're proposing a $15 minimum wage for town employees in 2021. And the actual experience from this year to what's budgeted next year, there's a big gap because we weren't able to fill a lot of those positions because either the wages were too low or we just had trouble attracting workers. We think Annie's connections to the Messalonsky High School will help us in that regard. And in fact, she's already got some more kids working there now than we've had in a while. So in the end, the budget is about $190,000 for recreation. Now, we're going to see an increase in what we budgeted for recreation revenue this year. We budgeted $33,000 this year. We're proposing $60,000 next year, which is flat to our actuals of this year. And so, that does help a little bit, but it's still a large number. We also have the matter of flexible spending accounts, which is an idea that Dan raised at the last meeting. And what flexible spending accounts are they're pre-tax dollars that you can use towards any sort of medical expenses, any out-of-pocket expenses. And of course, the plan that we offer is a pretty high deductible. It's $2,500. And so people could spend that. The firm that manages our HRAs also manages the FSAs. And so that cost would be approximately $2,000 per year to the town if we were to engage in a flexible spending account program. Additionally, we've got this morning, Bob the plumber called me and he got a good figure on the uranium treatment system for the Lakes Fire Department station, and that is $7,000. And so we're proposing to increase the Lakes Fire Station facility maintenance budget by $7,000. Now, one of the ways that we can sort of soften that blow and just the cost of facility maintenance as a whole is we do have a facilities capital reserve that is built through the rental revenue that we get from the Dalton properties. And that fund currently has about $60,000 in it. And so we could tap into that in order to reduce the tax burden of facility maintenance. Nick, did I hit all the high points?
Yeah, you got everything.
One question I've got, to go back to the code enforcement officer. Maybe something's changed since I was on the select board the last time, but code enforcement was basically a salaried position. It was so much an hour, it capped at 24 hours a week. So in the winter, when things were slow, the code enforcement officer might only put 18 or 20 hours in. And in the summer, when things were busier, they may end up with 30 or 32 hours in, and it all averaged out.
Mhm.
So why are we budgeting 27 hours? 24-hour a week position.
Well, again, I mean, I was concerned that there may be times where he's working more than 24 hours because of planning board meetings.
And there may be, there always used to be. Sometimes you work a little more and sometimes you work a little less, but you got paid, even if you work less, you got paid.
But I think the difference here, Dan, is that this employee is going to be earning two separate rates of pay.
Mhm.
And so I'm concerned about going over budget with the portion that we pay from the code enforcement position. So let's say that Richard does work 27 hours one week
Mhm.
for
Code enforcement,
code enforcement.
you should be getting paid 24 hours.
Well, what would we do with the other 3 hours?
It's a salary, as I said, it used to be a salary position. You got paid for 24 hours. There were many times in the winter when things were slow and Gary had nothing to do.
Well, and
So that's why I'm asking, did something changed since when I was on the
Well,
board last?
So he gets paid the same every week regardless
Right.
of what the hours he
That's
works.
the way it used to be.
all I can say is since I've been here, it's been an hourly position. So So I can't really speak to that, but, you know, I think there's some wisdom in that.
Yeah, I mean, we had Gary in once, and he was telling us the same thing. At one point, when I was on the board, that, yeah, there's some weeks in the winter, I work 16 hours. And he was getting paid X amount of dollars.
I'm betting that changed when Gary was hired here. I know he worked here for a long, long time, but then he came.
Well, that's what I was thinking, is
Yeah,
when
he
he
came
retired from the
full-
city of
yes, he
Augusta,
did,
and added
yes.
hours in Belgrade. And I
Yeah.
think we had switched at that point to the hourly.
I think that's true, yeah.
But
That
Gary,
sound- that
he
sounds
was
good.
physically here 24 hours every
He was
week doing stuff.
here 10 to, no, 11 to 7, unless there's a point board meeting on Thursdays, noon to 4 on Wednesdays,
8
and
to
full
4, 8 to 4
on Tuesdays.
on Tuesday.
So what's that, 8, 13,
Mm,
so 21, then he had field visits. He
Yeah.
usually had around 20, he didn't have less than 20 hours since he went to that new schedule.
And he rarely had more than 25.
Unless,
like that.
unless the meeting went crazy long, you know, or something like that.
I
Good,
know at
we're
one
in
point we
a
were talking
budget
about it.
workshop.
Back before, it's a
Right.
salary position, because we know that sometimes if you want, I'm gonna put in that many hours, because sometimes you are. But either way, okay, I was just curious, because
Oh, okay, I haven't
when I
had
was
a
on the board
chance to look
before,
at
it
it
was a
yet.
salary position. You know, we base it on 24 hours, and the salary is based on so
should
much
I
an hour,
step out and look at
24
it?
hours, which you get paid it. One way or the other. So, okay.
Actually, hang right on, Linda. I've got to take this. It's one of the department heads. Ricky's not up yet. Do you want to take over from him?
Yeah, I mean,
Third him off?
yeah, we're just talking. Anyway, so.
So that's my overview. If you want to move into the departmental budget review that we have not yet touched on from the last workshop, that begins the public works budget.
May I ask a question before we get into detail here? How will this be presented to the public when it comes to a vote? Will it be presented in this form?
No, yes, that is that's the draft warrant article right there.
So it won't be a one-page thing with the list of things. It will be, each person will have to go through this page by page.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, it'll be a multi-page ballot.
Very similar to last year, probably. So we have to, you spend hours voting, Jack, hours.
That's what I'm getting at. That's-
So the public works budget is on page 49, and I talked to Jason a little bit earlier. He's outstanding right now, but we have kept the budget flat from 2021 to 2022 when it comes to road maintenance.
So that total budget is up to about 10,000.
Yes, for
Yeah.
public works as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, our, you know,
And I take it that 10,000 is primarily wages and
Well, and
benefits.
did you point out to me that the plow standing contract, that's actually 30,000 more?
oh, that's correct.
Yeah,
So that figure is incorrect. Thank you for remembering that, Nick. So that figure should be like $297,000.
I think it was 297, 800, so I would say 298.
Okay. So that would increase the overall budget to 558. And of course, the plow contract is what it is. That's already been approved by the select board.
Right.
And how much we spend on sand and salt is always a bit of a guess. And so that year-to-date figure does not include Dave Stevens' final bills. But you can see the last couple of years, we've been somewhere around $100,000. This,
So for bills that carry over into the subsequent year, you just do it on a cash basis, or you include those? You know what I mean, like you anticipate so much to be billed.
yes,
Do you book that, or you?
no, we don't,
They just pay it in January, so,
and then a good
Technically-
journal entry back into.
so then last December's bills reflected in here. You know what I'm saying?
Is that correct?
So Dave will probably, not Jason, Dave will drop off the bill in January, mid-January. Once I get that, I'll do a warrant in the year 2021, so I'll hit these accounts.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, you leave the books open for.
Right, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So this, this point's related to roads, but it doesn't show up in the paving budget, it doesn't show up in the road budget. And that's under administration in Article 16 of the proposed warrant article. Pages aren't numbered, but on the second page of that article, it shows debt service, the actual, incidentally, my compliments to whoever put this together, because it shows actual against the proposed instead of budget against the proposed. And I think that's more telling as to what reality really is. But anyway, what I'm getting at is this, for the first time, puts under a general government debt service, which actually was these two numbers, 478 and 476, and it drops to 49,893. And that's because in a 3-year program, we don't have any debt service in the first year. And it makes the general government figures look really good. What it does is mask the increase in the general government proposal. So that's a big change, I think.
Well, and the reason for that change, Jack, really is that we're just trying to be mindful of the length of the ballot. Right now, the warrant as it stands would be 34 articles. And we just remember in the last couple of elections, people standing in those booths for 30, 40, 45 minutes. And so we tried to consolidate articles as much as we reasonably could. Just to try to reduce the number of articles that people had to wait for, and debt service struck me as a general government function.
But if you present it this way, it looks really nice in the first year, but the next 2 years will show quite differently, and it distorts the general government picture.
Understood, and I think that's why it's really incumbent upon us to do as good of a job as we possibly can, communicating mainly through the newsletter and through the town report, what's on this warrant and the reasons for the numbers being what they are.
And we have one more joint meeting where we do go through every warrant article and vote on this. I would think, I take it these are preliminary.
Well, I mean, I was hopeful we might be able to vote on some of the recommendations on some of these tonight. I did not expect we would get through all of them. But the ones that seem like everyone's in agreement on, I was hoping we should go ahead and vote on some recommendations.
Does anybody have heartache about taking debt service out of this and being mindful of Jack's consideration, because it is going to skew the data? So next year, when we're looking at the same thing and we see 2021 proposed or 2022 actual, and then what we're looking at is going to be a big increase, because now we would tack in the debt service for the following year. That is going to look like a huge jump.
Can you add verbiage in the article that clarifies?
MMA has told us that for ballot items, we shouldn't provide any sort of explanation, just just a Joe Friday approach.
Well, to me, it distorts the picture of municipal, but
I'm in agreement.
Well,
And
it's
I-
gonna do the same thing the following year.
Right, so we
So
were
you're just
looking
kicking
at,
the can down the road a year.
What are you saying, to make it a separate article?
right, to put debt, pull debt service out of this particular one. And I mean, it's not like we ever try to hide anything, but very clear, this is a 3-year program that we're proposing. The first year, the funds would come from here, year 2 from here. And then if nothing else, if folks are actually reading it, they're anticipatory that there's gonna be a jump next year. If they read it,
Nick, on the debt service, normally it can be structured 2 ways. Usually there's an interest payment at 6 months, and then there's a principal and interest payment in 12 months, or just one payment after 12 months. How do we normally structure
The 12 months.
12 months?
well, the point is, up until this year, it was reported that we reported debt service in a different way. We reported it as a separate article. And approved it as a separate article.
Yeah.
What, doing it this way because of this 3-year road program that doesn't have any debt service of $300,000 to $400,000 or whatever it is. Putting that into municipal expense reduces debt service by that amount and distorts that large article.
Break it out into a new article. a
Yeah.
different I mean,
Is there any debt service being retired?
Well, we paid off the last road bond. That's what's making that look so good or bad, how we want to look at it. But that's it. That's the only thing we paid off.
Okay, so what you're gonna see is a reduction, right? Because how much was that bond?
It was 452. I think that was 800,000 as well. Do you
Okay.
remember?
So does the separate article happen in this budget cycle, or is that in the next budget cycle?
Will we make a payment and stuff?
No, what Jack's proposing, are we pushing that to the next budget year? Is that?
So we would still have, yeah, we would still
Oh,
have
we still
some,
this year?
yeah, we still have some debt service this year, Scott, because there's still like a $49,000 note on this building that we're sitting in.
Right.
And so this year would be 49,000, and the next year would be somewhere in the neighborhood. Well, next year, yeah, it'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of 350,000.
the idea is to make it as clear to the voter as possible as to what you're doing here.
Yeah.
And that article doesn't necessarily make it terribly
Right.
clear.
And I understand that, but also you need to consider keeping the tax rate fairly static. And that's why I'm asking if
Yeah.
it's a separate article, is it gonna happen now or in the subsequent budget? Because what you're gonna have in the tax rate is you're gonna have a drop because you've retired debt service, and then you're gonna bring it back up again. So,
Well, in this instance, Scott, not so much, because it's a 3-year road project. And so we raise and appropriate taxes for the first year of that
Yeah.
3-year, and then we finance the other 2 years. So it remains a little bit more constant than that.
Okay.
It's not all debt service. Some of it's just simply raising and appropriating taxes. And then the following 2 years is when you're paying off the debt.
Thank you.
so there's still a note on the town office. Is there still any thing left on the Dalton properties?
No, this is the only debt that as of this moment, this is the only debt the town has.
That's pretty good.
That's really good.
I'd be happy.
If you recall how far we are to repaying that loan for the town office?
Town office, I couldn't tell it top of my head. We're really close. Maybe a few more years. Well, yeah, like 4 or 5 or something like that. So it's not much left on that one.
Okay, we can break out the debt service and make it its own separate article.
Anthony, you have a comment on that about the CEO software?
Yes.
And I guess I would look at a one-time fee. Shouldn't that come out of? It's not an ongoing expense.
It could,
Should that come out of reserves or out of something?
there's not a reserve that it would be appropriate for it to
For it
come
to
out
come
of,
out
but
of.
it could come from the undesignated fund.
Yeah.
You're right, because it's a one-time.
Because it's a one-time cost as opposed to a budget item.
Mhm.
I mean, ongoing.
And that's not, and that would just be a portion of that $6,000. So $2,500 of that. would
Right.
be-
But I think if we can split that out, just trying to be consistent. on that.
I want to get back to the public works budget just for a second on page 49. So one thing that we did not include here were any extra dollars for the village.
Lighting,
No, not lighting, the crossings,
the what?
the crossing treatment.
Oh, the crossings.
But if that's something that you guys want us to add in this, we can. I think it's something that we could also pay for out of just the general road maintenance.
What was the cost on that going to be? I was
Oh, God.
It's like $20,000.
Yeah.
20,000.
To do.
For what crossing?
We were doing some, considering doing some treatments of the pedestrian crossings in the village,
Yeah.
just to try to slow traffic down. So like when you drive down Water Street in Augusta, Gary, and there's those little pylons in the middle of the road,
Yeah,
something similar to that.
But weren't you only going to do, you weren't going to do the ones on the edge. You were doing
That's right.
just the crosswalk, right?
Yeah,
And that's 20,000 for.
maybe that's,
that-
maybe
that
that's too
sounds
high.
It
I think
does.
maybe that included
Those
the
end
re-
ones.
the end ones and the reflective lights.
I think
and-
so
Yeah.
too. It was the LED lighting
Yeah,
and we were
and
like,
maybe I'm wrong, that's just the figure that sticks in my mind.
yeah, so Anthony, if we can try to figure out what that actual figure is, because I don't remember either, because we looked at it a couple different ways. So we settled on doing the things in the middle of the road and having a couple of extras because somebody's gonna run them over.
Yeah.
Right,
And
and we were gonna put the. reflect-
changing the speed limits, like adding additional signage at
Right,
either end with the speed limit on it. But would we be responsible for those additional signs where it's a state roadway?
Yes, I believe that was the case.
Okay. And have they gotten back to us about the study on reducing the speed?
No, they have. I have not heard from Dave Allen. So I'm just looking. I was just looking through some select board minutes here to see if I can find it. but-
Can you do a keyword search like that?
Mhm.
Oh, wait.
All right, Bruce wanted to chime in.
I still say that this should be a separate article to be voted on, so the taxpayers actually know what they're voting for.
what
What
should
do
be
you
a
mean?
separate article?
What's separate?
The, in the lakes, not put into the general road maintenance. It should be a separate article. So people know what, what they're paying for, what they're voting for, not thrown into road maintenance and we're gonna take $20,000 out of road maintenance to do signage and crosswalks in the lakes on a DOT road. I still think it should be a article that people have to vote on to know that it's going.
I absolutely agree with him.
Can you find it there, Anthony?
I keep finding references to the discussion, but I have not seen one with the pricing. as of yet. I'm getting close. I think.
Yeah, I'm getting the same thing. All right.
So you'd rather see it as a separate article entirely, rather than, could it be lined item under this budget? So it's spelled out within this budget rather than a separate.
Correct, so the
article.
taxpayers know what it is, so if you should, if you're gonna include it, you're gonna increase the line item by $20,000. Well, the taxpayers ain't gonna know what that line item increased $20,000, so it should be voted as a separate article, so the people know what they're voting for that $20,000, that it's for sidewalk, crosswalks and stuff on a DOT road, not a town road. It needs to be spelled out as for a DOT road.
The in-street pedestrian crossing signs were about $300 each. I think we talked about, I think are there 7 crosswalks in the,
I think there's 7. There's 1,
Yeah, I think you talked about
2 at
buying
the
10 of them.
church. I think there are 4. Village Inn. 2.
and then the reflective borders on the speed sign was $145 each, compared with essentially $2,000 for LED signs.
Oh, yeah.
So we're looking at $2,000 or $3,000 then.
Not 20.
So I think originally we were talking about using up the LEDs because they were more efficient, would last longer too, so. We never did come up with a decision.
We did come up with a decision.
There was a vote. I
There
wasn't
was a
on
vote,
board.
but the vote was 2-1. We only had 3 members at that meeting.
That's right, and then we found out we
That's right,
couldn't,
and we didn't have
we
a
didn't
quorum
have a
because-
4, yep, because we were short a member. Well, that's right. So it'd really be 2,800 if we did. Did I do 8 of them? So that gives us 4 and 4 replacements. And then the reflective signage was, what'd you say, 150?
No, the reflective signs 145. But those are the borders.
And that was 2 signs,
I think that's right.
one on either end, because Rome didn't want to do anything with the signage,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's,
And then you were talking about adding another speed limit sign somewhere near the, what is it, Hewlin Road or whatever. It's one direction, it's missing a sign.
right,
Right.
Why doesn't the state put the sign back in? Augusta, it's town roads. Mount Vernon, it's town roads. This is a state road. Just my opinion.
didn't it have to do with the distance between the signs? Well, for them to put another sign there, it was gonna be,
It was strange, 'cause there's one going one way, but none on the other side.
right,
Tell the state to put one in.
And I think that was because it was turned onto, one way, it's not the other,
right.
From the West Road.
from the west road.
And how much is the speed sign, do we know?
Okay.
Why don't we say 1,000? We're still at $4,090. So then we didn't decide to move that project forward, so we can't really include it because it wasn't. Correct?
That what?
We didn't approve it as to add it to the budget because we didn't have a majority of the votes for it because we needed the full.
Right, but
Right.
we agreed to revisit it.
We can redo it next meeting, the 18th, which would be before this had to be printed.
Well, as Bruce suggested, I mean, we could do a separate warrant article that just simply outlines that proposal.
Right, but first the select board has to agree to move it forward.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we can
We
put
can
that
do
on
that
the
on the
next
18th.
agenda, we could, if we did that on the 18th, had a vote, and then it's a yes or no. We either move it forward or we don't.
Okay.
And then if we do move it forward, then we would need a separate warrant article reflective of the costs for 8 of the pedestrian things, 2 of the reflective borders, and 1 additional speed limit sign if the state won't provide it. But we'll definitely hit them up first.
We want the reflective order for that new sign.
Yeah, so I guess 3.
You just have to round it $5,000.
Yeah, exactly. 'Cause there'll be something else. It'll be like these little nuts that hold this in place or something.
So Dan, did I hear you say that your suggestion is just to limit it to no more than $5,000?
Yeah, well, she's got it added up to 4,000 something.
And if we add one more reflected border and,
Okay.
okay.
Are we still on roads?
I hope.
I don't know. I was like, where are we
No,
now?
Looking at the proposed Article 18, Public Works. Transfer station road, a tenth of a mile at $82,000. Looks high to me.
Well, and the reason for that, Jack, is that there's excavation that has to occur with that project. And so you may recall, if you visit the transfer station, when we were repaving there along the, around the recycling center, there were a lot of rocks and boulders that were dug up from that area. And that's what was causing the frost heaves. And so they dug all that stuff out, put gravel back in, and then paved on top of it. So, most of these projects don't, well, none of the others involve any sort of excavation. They involve pulverizing and reclaiming, but not excavation.
Well, I recall we talked about a lot of gravel being needed to raise the level of that road, and I agree with that. I agree that it's not just a routine paving job. On the other hand, for 1/10 of a mile, that's $820,000
Per mile.
per mile.
Yeah.
And to do the Gupta Road, which is difficult, is a little over a mile and 175, call it $160,000 a mile. It doesn't make logical sense to me to have that relationship.
Well, we actually got a quote for that work, and that's what the quote was. That's what that figure is based on.
I can say no more, but that's the way it looks to me.
In the project detail, can you add excavation?
Hmm?
That would explain that, or
Probably,
something
yeah.
that it's not only estimate, along with estimated costs or somehow excavation in there, so that makes sense that that's gonna be more money, because they've got to do a lot of prep work on it. Where they don't have to do all that work on those other roads.
Then I would come back and say for a 5-mile-an-hour road, that's the way it's posted.
Right.
It's not a safety issue.
No,
It could be a gravel road.
No, but the rocks would hit my new truck, Jack.
Got
I'm not
insurance
sure I
for,
could put up with
you got insurance for,
that.
pay all that money for. Yeah, it is an awful. That kind of work.
The problem is the town skimped when they did their project originally, when they built the transfer station, they skimped and used stumps and rocks for fill. And that's why we're at now, and that's why it's gonna cost us more money now.
How long does that paving last that we've done it now? How long is that?
Kevin Hawes was road commissioner. Not as long as I thought it would last. I think how long ago Kevin was. I only was chair.
Go back when you were here on the board last time.
Now, was that 16, 17?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How much did it, you remember how much it cost us then for to get 5 years out of it?
I know some of it has been re-gravelled, but I think the biggest pack is where that, the people that go to the transfer station. In the springtime, you get the big sinkholes. They come and go, some small cars,
right.
do quite a bit of damage. Pulverize it and dig everything out, turn it to direct gravel, but you'd be dealing with washouts and runoff, process, into the bowl.
What are your thoughts, Jack? You talking to me? So what are your thoughts with that section on the transfer station road? And did we get just one quote?
So that quote was from Bono and Sons, which had the low bid for that project previously.
And did we put that out for others or just to
Mhm.
Bono?
Yeah.
So
All
they,
I'm saying is that looks high in relation, looks very high in
It
relation
does.
to the other road work that's proposed here.
How
And
much
in
would it cost
relation
us
to
do
a
the
five
excavation
mile an
in-house?
hour road.
I don't know, that wasn't. I don't know, did you speak to Jason about that, Anthony?
Mhm.
I wonder if he would be willing to do the excavation part of it,
Probably.
probably.
I mean, I would think it would be a lot cheaper doing it that way, and then have somebody come in and do the paving.
Maybe you ought to revisit it. Your next meeting, to see if Jason can do an estimate on that.
yeah, because we're still waiting. He's gonna come back with something from Pro Seal too, and
Oh, I have that.
you have that today. Okay.
So that project would only be $3,000. So that could just very easily be done within the general road maintenance budget as part of the crack seeding program.
I think it's worth asking the question on this, if we can do it in-house rather than hiring somebody to do all the excavation work.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll get a quote from Jason on excavating and then putting gravel down. to surface the base.
And then will we have to get a requote for paving?
Well, at that point, we can just apply the formulas that we've used for the other
Yeah,
for the other road projects.
stuff.
Okay.
That's what we did with the Chandler Road, when we put that culvert in several years ago. We gravelled it in the fall and it went all winter as a gravel road.
Right.
And it was paved later on.
Which packs it really well too.
Right.
All right. Are we ready to move on to social services?
That is,
I'm like, where
on
is it?
page 66.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have my red book, so there's a red book floating around here in the town office. I
What
think it
page is
just
it?
says select board on it.
66.
Systems.
All right, so under Memorial Day, and just essentially when we hire the sheriffs, have we checked to see if their rate is gonna stay the same? Because it seems like we paid the same rate for at least the last,
Yeah, I haven't checked, of course, they
5
did the
years or so.
holiday stroll, we got the bill for that.
that same amount. Okay. I flagged that because I wanted to be sure.
Do we pay them if it rains?
I'm sorry?
So we did not. We
Good
did not
thing
pay
last
them,
year.
we did not pay them on Memorial Day, because you recall that we
Yeah.
were gonna have.
Moved it to the
cemetery and
school.
it rained, and so, no, we didn't.
That just seems like a lot of money.
We pay a lot already. We said we pay a lot to the county already.
Watch it, the county administrator sitting down here.
Yeah.
And now the flags for Memorial Day, there's nothing in there for that. Is that the small American flags that go on the veterans' graves and we purchase them and we reuse them?
No, those are the flags that go along Cemetery Road.
Okay, and we don't need to replace any that got tattered or worn or anything this past year.
Let me see. Oh, wait, maybe I'm mistaken about that. Bruce, do you know?
I believe that is for the flags along the road, but I'm looking at the budgetary, because there was nothing budgeted 2021. I have a feeling it's coming out of the cemetery budget. Has been. Am I right on that?
Yes, we're talking more of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's becoming out of the line of their 5302 Memorial Day flags. I'm putting 1,500 for that.
Is that for the little ones and the big ones?
I think that's for everything. Or have to
Must be
double check.
because, yeah.
All right.
They haven't budgeted that.
The purchase for equipment for senior resources. What is that equipment?
I think I gotta change that description. They, Mary, that 2,000 for senior resource, is
It's
that?
not just for equipment, it's for programming and things that we may need for the senior resource to run programs, activities. We are looking for a storage closet, things like that, where they can store their items up there. And we said if we get a donation or something like that, then we won't expend it. But it's to do things, have coffee and tea up there, similar to what they do down to the Center for All Seasons. But to offer it in a different location as well on an alternate day. Just to help pay for expenses. It's basically just expenses for senior programming for the year.
So it seems like that should be classified a little bit differently. So,
Well, there's equipment for 2,000 and then there's
right, 1,500 for
Expense for-
expense, senior resource,
for
3,500.
3,500.
No, so the 1,500, so there's 2,000 for the expenses for the senior programming. The 1,500 is for an unfunded ordinance that has been unfunded for several years, that was put in place back when Denny Petcher was here. It's a senior work ordinance. It's $1,500, which allows seniors to be able to come in. It could be not one, each senior can work up to and earn up to $750 off their taxes. We could offer it to 10 seniors and reduce the amount that's abated towards their taxes. So it's a senior work ordinance that we have in place already, and it's just basically been.
Do we have a copy of that, Mary? Because I remember when
I
we
thought I gave
first,
you everybody a copy. I can put you a copy if you want. a copy.
yeah, if you've got one, I think that would,
I don't think I have it right here. I mean, it would take me a minute to just go pull it off.
yeah, because I remember us talking about that, and then I thought that there was something about that we weren't able to do it that way because it was illegal to ask folks who were retired to work to reduce their overall tax burden.
So it's not illegal. So
Is
I'm
that-
not sure where that information came from.
Because I thought
So
that's
what
why we
want
ended
to
up
make
not
sure is that
doing it.
People do jobs that are within their means, and it would be simple things, having them come in, maybe folding newsletters, things like that, that they're not going to be harmed at in any way. So answering telephones for short a day or different things, but it's not just here at this facility. They could be used at the library. They could be used at the Center for All Seasons. It's a volunteer, so. hold on.
There was a reason
I
we
will
didn't
pull it.
implement it, Mary.
Excuse
I
me.
remember there was a reason that we didn't end up implementing it. And I thought it was,
No, it got passed and put in place.
but we didn't
was never
utilize it.
revoked. But we needed to make sure that the jobs fit the ability of the senior and not to cause them any harm in any way that would. But we just, I think we funded it 1 year and that was it. It just kind of, after so many changes in admin, it just kind of got dropped. So let me go forward.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
So you guys want me to change those line titles to something more specific of what they're for?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that one that says equipment, it's more program and miscellaneous.
right.
So the increase on that page is generally the senior projects, as I read it.
And at the moment, we budgeted $5,000 each for general assistance and for emergency fuel. I mean, we could increase that, the general assistance, we could, fund out of the undesignated fund. Emergency fuel, we're gonna check with the auditor when she's here next week, just to see if we need to specify that any unspent emergency fuel funds lapse back into that fund. We don't want those funds to lapse into the undesignated fund.
I thought we already have a mechanism in place for that.
Well, it's just unclear to Nick and I if there needs to be any special language. We have other special revenue funds and the funds just lapse back into those. We just want to be doubly sure that that's the case. with the funds.
So I've got one copy. Do you want multiple copies?
Well, yeah, what I'll do, let me
There's
just,
the actual ordinance, and then there's the rules and regulations on that, and the guidelines for that ordinance.
all right, the town of Belgrade shall adopt a volunteer work program that permits, so it says pursuant to state statute, section 236 MRSA 6232 subsection 1A, the town of Belgrade shall adopt a volunteer work program that permits claimants who are at least 60 years of age to earn benefits up to a maximum of $750 by volunteering to provide services to the town of Belgrade. This tax credit will be paid by tax abatement. The town select board shall work through committee in drafting and approving regulations, establishing procedures and standards of eligibility for the volunteer citizen work program. So this was March 19 of 2010. But we didn't do it,
Those are the rules and regulations, those next two pages.
right? But did we ever implement the program? Because I don't recall that we actually
think we
put
ever
it
No
in
one's
place.
ever participated in the program. The program is voted on by the legislative body, so it is an active ordinance.
I'm not saying it isn't, Mary, but I'm
Yeah.
saying I remember there was a reason that we didn't implement the program. So in the last 11 years, we probably
No,
just
that
want to
I'm
make
aware of.
sure
Yeah.
that there isn't any reason that we couldn't do it. And be sure we do want to
There was
do it.
another program that we could implement, it had something to do with insurance reasons, but I don't think it
That
was that.
was
It was
the-
something to do with,
That was the little one. We
Clean-
did
clean-
end up
right.
implementing it.
yeah, 'cause yeah, that's the one that we, were for some reason, I remember we weren't sure if we could do it.
Right, we had to have them sign a release of
Right.
liability, and so that was a different.
This one, I
program.
just
So
think
we
nobody
did.
ever took advantage of, and we never advertised it all that well.
And can we do a tax abatement through a volunteer program? And if we could in 2010, can we still do it in 2022?
Well, an
As long as that
ordinance is an
statute's still,
ordinance.
yeah, as long as that state statute's still in place.
Right, and I can research the statute for you if you want, I don't have it at my fingertips right now.
Is that a state statute or
Yeah, it's a
it
state
is?
statute. Yeah,
Yeah, I would think, Jack. You and I go for about 150 an hour, don't we? Huh?
Unfortunately, it's not a paid.
Rest of these
position.
guys, not quite that, Jack, but you and I.
Yeah, how many hours would they have to work for the 750? Would
Well,
be
they
considered
don't
at
have to.
$15 an hour?
Well, did we put a dollar amount per hour?
No.
Because it should have
does
been.
the rules and regulations say minimum wage or?
So minimum age says 60, says you have to be a current resident of Belgrade and have resided in Belgrade for 2 years, have a property tax burden greater than 4% of gross family annual income, apply any benefit to their primary residence only, be the person responsible for the tax bill, be the only participant applying for the program per household, be a registered participant in the state's tax circuit breaker program. Town manager administers the program. And on or before January 1st of each year, the town's departments, committees, and other interested parties must describe and request to the select board the number of hours and tasks that they would like accomplished for the ensuing year. On or about February 1st, the Board of Select Persons shall certify surplus funds are available to cover the abatements approved. Application deadline is March 1st each year. All work must be completed by October 15th. Applicant certification for work will be done by the town manager or his or her designee or department head.
An annual report will be submitted by the program administrator to the town at town meeting of every year. Okay, town job-related injuries evaluation. The success shall be evaluated usually with the following criteria: number of applicants for the program and the number who qualified, quality of the work performed, jobs completed, benefit to the town, were there any job-related injuries, were the tasks too physically taxing for the workers? Did the town receive any suggestions for new jobs or improving the program? What was the cost or were there savings, and is more money required to expand the program?
So it must have been a minimum wage.
Minimum wage, I would assume.
So, and if
So you
you're
can have 10
looking
people
for,
work 2 hours or something, and, you
Well-
know, it's not just.
Well, the way that ordinance reads, anybody who qualifies, if we have 10 people apply and they all qualify, they can all earn up to $750 off their taxes.
But it only allows for so much money, doesn't it?
No, it says excess funds to cover it,
right,
because each person can make up to $750.
Okay, so we started at 1,500.
I think we
so
did that
there's two
figuring, that-
people.
well, I think we figured that this one person wasn't gonna end up,
Right,
you know, they
and I
were
think
worth
both
10 to
you and
12 hours.
Melanie were on the board at the time that that.
yeah.
was-
Yeah, I vaguely remember it now.
Yeah,
So nobody's ever done it.
No,
I don't think it really was advertised all that much.
I doubt it.
Well,
was.
And there are quite a few stipulations, so you're gonna be part.
yeah, and department
registered in
heads
this
have to
thing,
say,
and-
we'd like somebody to come collate, blah, 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 we want someone to,
Well, you have to provide supervision. you
Right,
have
but
to
I think there's a
provide
bunch of other
bookkeeping.
stipulations there, that you're gonna be enrolled in other programs.
circuit breaker
Yeah,
program,
circuit.
which I think that program no longer exists. does it?
Yeah, so,
Circuit breaker doesn't even exist anymore in the state government. so.
you're gonna be under a certain income
So
level.
the idea was to get that onto the plate.
Yeah.
and to
I don't-
offer the
I don't have a problem with that.
opportunity to seniors. And, you know, you guys can rewrite the rules.
But what you basically put in the budget was for 2 people for $750.
Because I just started at.
Basically
the
seed
bottom.
money.
Yeah,
Get it started and go from there.
right. And I thought it was a good thing, so.
Yeah.
so would we put that under expense, senior resource volunteer program or senior
We're talking about
resource?
1,500.
Yeah,
Yeah. we can do that.
so I think we probably should revisit it at our next meeting if possible, so that we can figure out
Qualify.
qualifiers and.
I mean, just find out if everything that
Well,
we
circuit
were
breaker
requiring is still
program
in effect.
Doesn't exist. One of the main requirements.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. if it doesn't-
I'll make some
if it-
photocopies. and,
Living on
I'll
Social
send them on
Security.
the-
Okay, but we're not talking about changing,
Yeah.
we're not talking about changing the amount, what's in the budget here. Will stay.
So that would be what, 3,500 for the senior resource. And does that include, Mary, so in the 2,000 and then that, well, if the 1,500 is for that, is that enough for mailings or some of the other things? I know you have the senior survey and that
I'm planning
in
on
the
it.
office.
I'm planning on it. I think that would be good. I already have some volunteers, so-
It's a way to start the program. Next
Absolutely.
year, if we find out, it's different, we may change.
If it works, it works.
I'm getting older, I'm getting closer to retiring and do that.
You and me both, but I think you're closer.
I know I'm close.
Just by a hair, but. All
I
right, are
would
we,
think you'd use that program when people came in and questioned, how can they pay their taxes? Other than, rather than advertising, you have a program. That's just my way of thinking, that
And
you would
that's
use it
all-
as an answer
And that's. a
to some
possibility,
folks'
too.
taxes problems. It just makes, that makes sense to me. And I rest on having said that. And Jack and I are expensive. We need to be considered, huh, Jack?
Well, you get all confident.
all right, we all good with social services? All right, let's move on to dams.
We provide a package that's not part of the
All
book.
right, let's,
Yeah.
And
It's in here and things.
Yeah, the dam committee chair, Dick Green, is joining us via Zoom.
Good
Hey,
evening. Hi,
Good
guys.
evening. Right. So an increase of 25%.
Yes, it's 5176 over last year.
That's the biggest increase I think we've seen in a while, isn't it, Deb?
No, actually, last year, Belgrade share last year was 25,000. And the year before, it was 20,000. And the year before that, it was 38.4 for 2 years.
That was some of the dams repair, right?
Yeah,
And
that was for the Wings Mill remediation. And part of the increase for this year is to fund a new capital reserve fund, so we won't see the big swings down the road. We're going to have a capital reserves fund that will build up and accrue. So we won't have, when the next big job comes up, we'll have the funds there. Hopefully, or more of them. So that's 15,000 that we'll be funding.
And are any of the other contributing towns, Dick, have we asked them to contribute to a reserve account?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The same request is going out in the same per rata share for each town. Yep, absolutely.
So if they come in on it, so would the 15 be the total amount to fund that fund to get it established, or
Yes.
would we? So if, say, Rome agrees to contribute 1,000 and Mount Vernon throws in $365 or whatever, that reduces the 15,000. So Belgrade would not be raising and appropriating that total amount.
That's exactly right. Just a share, which is a 48% share. It's about half of the total 15,000 would be Belgrade's, because Belgrade's share of the cost is 48%. And that's based on shore miles for some of the new folks here. That Belgrade has 37 miles of shoreline. Rome has 17 miles, Oakland 11, Sydney 6, and Mount Vernon 5. So that's how all that works.
Does Mount Vernon's mileage include Ingham Stream?
Yes, it would.
It does.
Yep. Jack, I assume it does.
So that number may change if we get monies from the other towns. That
Oh, no,
bottom
we've already, we've always had 100% participation. So,
Why is that capital reserve not on the article? Capital reserves. Article 30, which is capital reserves, but I don't see any in both.
Well, and I guess I would wonder, James, if that would be considered a town capital reserve, since this is an interlocal agreement.
Well, it doesn't show up as them establishing the capital reserve on the dams, so it's gotta come up. That'd be spelled out somewhere.
So Mary, would that be your understanding if the dam committee is going to establish a capital reserve and the voters have to approve the establishment of that?
And I think that usually name it as an interlocal reserve account, whether it's defined as what communities give and people share. Not an established reserve account, where you can set one up.
And I just didn't see it here. so.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
And if we are the fiscal agent, would each community have to vote to establish that reserve?
I know, because it's, we need to look at both.
Maybe a question for the MMA.
So we would also need a separate article to create a reserve account.
Well, I was under the impression the dam committee was gonna have a reserve account. We would be asked for more money to form that account for them.
We would contribute, it wouldn't be our fund, but we would.
Wouldn't be our fund, it'd be their fund.
And that's fine if we do that. It's spelled out that that's where the money's going to somewhere. I think, yeah, absolutely.
I've never seen the dam committee come to the budgeting process before. All I've seen is the bill, so I'm extremely happy to see them here. But they're also pretty damn important to us.
Mhm.
We'll seek some clarification on an interlocal agreement like this. And since we are the fiscal agent, we have to create the reserve account, or all the towns have to vote to create the reserve account. Find out legally what the responsibilities are.
Yeah, so the Dames committee, end up paying the bills
We
to
do,
us.
yes.
So we are. gonna have
Each
to
town
have- Yeah,
pays
so we are gonna have.
and
to
they
have-
spend the money, yes.
Yeah, I'll have to check with them, see how that can set up.
And then I think we would need to take that 15,000 out of the bottom line for the dams committee and set that as a separate article. Creating that capital reserve.
Yeah, creating the capital reserve and raising and appropriating Belgrade's share of that.
Right.
Well, is that what they're asking us to do?
Yes.
That's, you want Belgrade to create that capital reserve?
No, as far as the legality of it, I'm not certain. It's just that's going to be part of our budget to every year we will be asking for the 15,000 divided by the 5 towns.
I think you need a little guidance on that, how to do
Yeah,
that.
because I mean, it has to be spelled out.
Yeah.
It's not being
To me, the
spent.
easiest
Yeah.
way is to give them the money, let them create their own capital reserve.
Yeah.
But then to present that to the population may be a little difficult.
Right, because they need to know it's not being spent every year.
Exactly.
So it's really gonna reduce the budget by 15,000 or the proportionate share. The actual
maintenance
budget.
operation.
Yes,
Maintenance
yes,
part.
you know.
Right, so
Yeah.
that would be 40,350. And then we wouldn't have a 25% increase. In
On that
particular, right, on that, but,
That warrant article, right?
all right, so then I would, if we can do a little bit of work between now and our cleanup meeting, just reduce the amount in the dams
So is that gonna be 2 warrant items or 1?
2.
It's all what-
You gotta find
Whatever
out.
whatever MMA
Right.
says.
Yeah, depending upon what MMA says.
Well, plus, I think historically, I think Rome is always popular with reserve accounts. I think if they get a new fire truck, they basically take a huge hit, in one fiscal year. So they're not as much in the reserves.
Well, I think what they want is exactly right. We've had problems with dams since I moved here a long time back, so they need an account what they could go to for these problems that they have. And I know there's still problems with some of the dams, so.
All right, anybody else want to quiz Dick? All right, seeing none, Dick, I think we're gonna cut you free unless you want to hang out with us. We're kind of a fun group, so.
I will hang out for a little bit. Yeah. Appreciate your support.
We appreciate all the work you guys put in. All right, next up, we have capital reserves.
Yeah, so those are reflected in Article 30 of your draft warrant.
One thing on that reserves where it says fire tower fund.
Yeah.
Can you add the word communications in there? Because most
Fire
people are
tower.
gonna look at that and go, fire tower. We're gonna have forest rangers climbing the fire tower, looking for fires. So it'll be the fire communications tower. or something.
So if this was one that was established in the past, but it was an unfunded one, do we need clarification on that as well moving forward? Because it looks to me if we just include it in the existing capital reserves, it gives the impression that it's been funded.
It was funded.
It
at
was
one point in
funded.
time, and it was the repeater fund.
Yeah.
It was the repeater, not the fire tower fund.
That's a repeater.
That's the electronics.
Communication.
Send your signal
Same
out.
thing.
Okay,
In 2017, it was no longer on the books for whatever reason.
well, that's what I'm wondering is if
Funds
if there was a
were
fund that
exhausted.
existed, but it was no longer funded, the fund no longer exists. So we would essentially have to reestablish the fund. So, and by doing so, do we need a separate warrant article? Because it isn't a fund that's been funded.
Does it show in the audit?
No, it's not in the audit.
It's not in the audit.
So I think we need a warrant article to reestablish or the fire communications tower fund. Start the fund with $10,000.
We're gonna have to go through all that process. Let's call it the fire communications tower / electronics or communicate, so that it also can cover the electronics that have to go on.
Right, because we sometimes have quite an expense out to calm, so.
Okay, so fire tower / communications and electronics fund.
I think you said communication tower. and
Communications tower and equipment
I think that covered.
in that way.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Dave, can you please repeat that?
Fire communications tower and equipment fund. Our communication equipment fund, so I know it's not just regular, any equipment.
okay, so we'll move that one out to another article.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
If we're gonna rename it, you may want to just call it fire and rescue. I'm just thinking. Just include, Belgrade Fire and Rescue. Just a thought.
I don't think we can fit all that on that line, Travis.
Oh, well, if you can, I think fire is fine. It's just.
I'm
a
just
thought.
kidding. We'll put a little acronym and make it a 2-line name if we need to.
Perfect.
All right, does anybody else have anything there? Solid waste capital reserve. So we're not looking to appropriate anything.
No, that's the decision to be made, is we don't know what it is. So again, right now, we've got about $57,000 from that fund. We'd like it to be $100,000. But we just approved the $19,000 purchase of a compactor container. And if we're going to put forth a warrant article to purchase a new skid steer for the transfer station, we got to determine how we want to fund that. Do we want to raise and appropriate from the capital reserve or from the undesignated fund? It is a capital cost, so we could purchase that from the undesignated fund. And then move from the undesignated fund into the solid waste capital reserve, the 43,000 plus the 19,000, if we wanted to reach that $100,000 goal this year.
So I think we kind of need to do the same thing that we did last year. And it sounds nice if we say, take this out of the undesignated fund, take this out of the undesignated fund, but we need to know where that fund sits. And if we take everything out of the undesignated fund that we're proposing, where does that leave the undesignated fund at the end? And make sure that there is more than enough overlay there to cover the first quarter of expenses and
Oh, yeah,
and any
so
emergencies.
just as a
on
reminder,
this.
on December 31st of last year, the undesignated fund balance was 3.5 million. Of course, that gets spent down until we collect taxes in the summertime. And I think at its lowest point, Nick, was it?
It just went under 2 million.
Yeah,
It just went under 2 million.
and so, we finished the year in the black. And so that undesignated fund will grow, and the auditor, when she is here next week, will, that's one of her tasks, is to find out what that fund balance was at the end of the fiscal year.
So solid waste, if you're gonna add that 50, whatever it is, to bring it up $100,000 proposed, we're just shifting places. We're not raising and appropriating. You're just transferring it from
That's
one
correct.
place to another.
That's correct.
So it's not really changing the spending. You're just moving into an account holding it there.
Right.
What's the current balance in the solid waste? Because I don't have a current balance list.
Well, and so these balances are, they're not the audited figures. And so Nick and I did a quick calculation this afternoon, and it's around 57,000.
And that's before the container
That's
purchase.
before-
So
That's
it's
before the
really
container.
37,000.
Correct.
So if we move that other, the balance to get it over there to what you want for 100,000, we're just moving it from one place to another. We're not
That's
raising
correct.
it, we're not spending it, so.
That's right.
Right,
Would
Yeah,
just
it's-
be
it's-
appropriate.
it's just there.
Yeah, it's there for really the,
I have no.
knock on wood, that it never happened.
Dealing with that with capital reserves and we're not spending, I don't have a problem with it, but
But I remember last year, one of the conversations we had was that if we don't overexpend, if we don't overfigure what we need so dramatically, we wouldn't have so much in the undesignated fund. So we've got to figure out what that balance
well, I
is.
remember
and
a few years ago, we got away from all these capital reserves. You remember that?
Yes,
It's like, we don't want all these capital reserves anymore. And now we're back to having capital reserves, so
right.
it seems to change the way the wind blows.
Well, is this first column, 2022 proposed, is that the total that's being proposed, or is that the change that's being
No,
proposed?
that's the total, Jack. And those figures match what we did in 2021.
And that's the target, that's the target where we want to end up.
No. That's how much we would be shifting from the undesignated fund into the capital reserve. So for the fire and rescue capital reserve, we're proposing shifting $75,000 from the undesignated fund into that capital reserve.
And there's currently 345,000 in there.
Yes.
What Bruce wants to.
Oh, Bruce, sorry.
So this may be a question for Anthony or for Nick. So do you guys have an idea if you had everything from for the transfer station, the skid steer, the 18,000, whatever, all in the coming out of the undesignated fund, do you have a total amount that it would be right now?
What the undesignated fund would be?
No, what you would be taking out of the undesignated fund.
Oh, so, well, we couldn't buy the container out of the undesignated fund because only the voters could approve that.
Right, but you'd be refurbishing the capital
Yeah,
reserve.
so let's say, is that 40, is that 57 right now? So 43 plus 19 for the container. So that's 62. And then,
Skid steer.
and then if we did
59
the
for the
skid
skid
steer,
steer.
that's another 59.
Okay, and then you take all the other capital reserves that you're gonna fund, would that give us a total amount that would be coming out of in the designated? fund?
Okay, so let me calculate this real quick.
I think that's what you're looking for right now.
Yeah, well, and if,
Roundabout way.
Yeah, as long as there's enough balance there.
I just want to see if we have any other ones that
So that would
say,
be $476,000. And again, last year, the fund balance, the undesignated fund ended the year at 3.5 million. And it grew from the year prior to that, because we ended in the black. We anticipate it's going to grow above $3.5 million this year.
How much money are we transferring average every year? Like last year, how much did we transfer on that under that?
From undesignated into that.
Into-
$345,000.
I think probably to Dan's point, for a presentation, I think it would be helpful if you started with the beginning balance, the additions to the reserves, what came out of the reserve, and then what the current balance is here.
Yeah, I think that's right, I agree with that.
Yeah.
yeah, easier to
need to see
follow.
the
So-
whole picture.
So are you proposing 4 different columns then?
Yep,
Just for the capital reserve fund.
And there should be a date on that proposed capital reserve too, because that changes during the year. Is that the end of the year? Is that that's the end?
Yes, sir.
That's
So,
the target ending balance in 2022.
so what we want to use is the audited figure that the auditor will give us as the beginning balance.
We should also recognize any withdrawals that we intend to make during the year of 2022.
Well, I don't know that we can say that because all of our capital expenses are in this, will be on this warrant, which essentially is the paving project and the skid steer. Those are the only 2 capital projects that we're proposing. But things happen over the course of the year and one never knows.
Lose a pump on a fire truck and, that's a big expense.
But if we're taking money out of capital and putting it into reserves, presumably we have a target at some point at the end of the year. So we should recognize that target as the sum.
Yeah, so I see your point, Jack. So for instance, for the cemetery equipment replacement capital reserve, and help me out with this, Bruce, but I think the target for that has typically been $15,000, which is the cost of a new mower.
Yes.
And so for the fire and rescue capital reserve, the cost of a new fire truck was somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 the last time.
That was a tank truck. That was a pumper. The next truck to replace is a pumper. So you can
And
be,
is that more expensive?
yeah,
$500,000.
$500,000 plus.
Okay. And frankly, I mean, like with the fire and rescue building capital reserve, we're just trying to accumulate as much as we can there so that we have to borrow less when it comes time to build a fire station.
We could put a page in the town report to talk, that kind of explain capital reserves and what the goals are, because that might be nice to put in there. What we're trying to cap in that, what you're trying to have, ones that you're trying to set a goal for, that won't be capped.
right.
Yeah, plus if you did a roll forward, let's say 2025, you're gonna buy a pumper truck for $500,000. That would show whether you actually will get to the $500,000.
Be nice to explain it.
I mean, I know like it's going to be a pumper and a rescue. What's going to be the next 2 trucks?
Yeah, especially since we're using the rescue so much now.
That's it. Well, it's on the 10-year replacement because it's going to get eaten up, but it's all.
Page in the town report sounds right.
Yeah.
With an explanation as to what we're actually paying for.
I just want to pop back to public safety, Article 17. Says to see if the town will appropriate $49,794 in non-tax revenue. What is that revenue source?
That's listed in the detail below.
Okay,
That includes the town of Rome firefighter contribution, the fire department cost recovery revenue, and dog fees. And keep in mind, dog fees don't help pay for the fire department, but this is the public safety budget, which includes the animal control.
so we think we're gonna see another 5,000 come in from the insurance reimbursement for cost recovery?
No, so what we do with cost recovery is that 15,294, that's how much we collected in 2021. Then we apply it to the budget in 2022. That way we have an exact figure. We're not just guessing how much cost recovery revenue we might collect over the course of the year.
Oh, because I assumed the 9,200 under 2021 actual was the actual collection.
That was the collection from 2020. And then we applied it to 2021.
Okay, That's a little bit confusing.
Well, again, we wanted just to make sure that we knew what the figure was each year. Because otherwise, some years we might collect $50,000 in cost recovery. Some years we might not collect anything. So we didn't want to, put a figure in there that we didn't have some certainty on. That's just because that revenue stream can fluctuate pretty wild.
So are we proposing 32.5 from the town of Rome, or is that what they've given us this year?
No, that's what we're proposing.
And then if they don't contribute 30, say they hold at 25, where do we come up with the other 7,500?
That's a good question.
I'll have to have a come to Jesus meeting with them.
Why is it an increase for Rome this year?
Because the cost of that firefighter has increased.
Okay,
We're raising
that's-
wages,
yeah.
the pension, and then the increased benefits.
So, Bruce,
So I think what we should do on that is have a contingency. So if Rome doesn't fund the full 32.5, that it actually comes back to us. And if they do, I mean, it's wrong because we can't, it's not on the floor, so we can't decrease it, but I think you ought to have it in there, so it's funded.
well, that's what I'm saying is,
Yeah,
if we're saying these are the revenue sources and this is what we're gonna count on with our budget, and then if the monies don't come in,
so
then we're short.
right, so what I'm saying is Rome may not vote to fund it at all. So I'm saying we should have it in our budget to fund the 32.5. And then if Rome does it, we don't use it, it goes back into the undesignated fund at the end of the year.
Don't we have an agreement with Rome that they'll fund this thing?
You're relying on the taxpayers to vote it. And correct. That's how the contract or the agreement is, correct? It's voted on.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the select board could not.
Can't obligate across years?
Obligate the voters year after year.
Wow.
So that's that would be my recommendation on that is to change that so that we're funding that regardless. If they don't or don't, if they do or don't.
So Bruce, are you suggesting that in the warrant article, there should be a note that says, should Rome not approve this?
Yep,
Just something to that effect?
correct. Is
Wouldn't we take it from undesignated money?
Is that legal or not legal?
But the only thing that is just with the voter, but if it's part of. So.
I don't know that I would consider that.
There's got to be a way that they have to do it year after year.
Absolutely.
It's no different than if you bond something for 3 years. Could the town say, we're not paying it, or like our county funds that we gotta pay, we can't turn around next year and go, yeah, we're not paying your increase. There has to be a way somewhere.
Well, how about the water system that we're talking about with the state? That can't just run year by year.
Well, I would doubt that Rome is gonna shoot it down. I mean,
Right.
kind of like cutting off your nose to spite your face, but
We have a 3-year contract with the road plowing people.
still do.
Yeah,
So maybe we need to negotiate with them and right now you're at the tick time. But for us, we're at the tick time. I think we need to just somehow get it in the article. If they don't fund it, that we cover it. It's covered.
We're gonna have to, but
I mean, because, at this point, we can't do about that position at this point. My opinion.
So your suggestion though is have Rome do the 2-year contract essentially to cover.
2 or 3 year. At this
Yeah.
point, we can just sign a 3-year contract. I mean, the contract would have to rate with the increases of expenses that the rate will increase
Yeah.
a certain percentage.
you're talking to Rome, is it better to have a figure out there, out in public, or is it better to just rely on the negotiations to get it and recognize we could fall back on undesignated funds perhaps for a year if we needed to.
I don't know.
I think if we offer Roman out, they'll take it. That's been the, sort of where we've been at with the dams and, having them fund their full portion has always been a bit of a struggle. I think last year their decision to come in on this was right before town meeting, right? Because their town meeting was right before ours. So we kind of found out at the
That's
tail
exactly
end, but what
right,
we had
yeah.
put in for the warrant article was we were gonna fund 50,000, anticipating 25,000 would come
Yep.
from Rome, but if it didn't, we were agreeing to fund the whole amount. So I think that's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
But the way this article is written, it says any unexpended goes to the equipment fund. So not back to the undesignated fund. So if we worded that we pay the whole amount and anticipate this additional from Rome, then we'd either have to split it into two or have it go to the capital reserve, the equipment.
Well, you
reserve.
could, right, you could do it to capital reserve, then next year it's not, if it does not appropriate so much out of the undesignated fund. You know what I'm saying? So if Rome does do it, then you decrease what you're gonna appropriate out of the undesignated fund in 2023 by 32,500.
Does Rome know what that figure is?
We're waiting on this group to make decisions to share a figure with them.
Well, all I was saying is I think it would be better procedure to talk to Rome first before we put a number out in our book.
Right. I mean, and, realistically, having a conversation with them before now is probably not a bad idea because the conversations have been held for the last 9 months about increasing the rate of pay and benefits and
That board should understand which way their population's gonna go.
the other thing too is that we don't bill Rome for things like the use on the vehicles, depreciation, equipment repairs,
That's
things
right.
like that. So
Yeah,
they're paying for a body,
Right, I said Dan does
Half
have
a
that
body.
figured out.
half a body.
Dan has that figured out, I believe.
He does, but they're not, we haven't asked them to contribute.
I think that's in this 32,000. That's
Well, no, I mean, it's not, but, this is gonna be a market increase for them. And I just wouldn't want to push our luck too much. I mean, we want this partnership to work.
Right,
And
but
so-
I think what I'm saying is if it feels like it becomes a negotiating process, that we then say, please keep in mind what the value of the service that you're getting.
Oh, yeah, sure, fair enough.
And that we are not charging you for X, Y, and Z. And the town of Belgrade has been absorbing these costs all along. So if we need a negotiating chip,
Travis, have any input you want to put in?
Travis, you want to throw down on this?
I'm actually messaging Dan. He's gonna hopefully pop back on to put in some input, but my feeling is I would hate for them to turn this down completely. Because then we don't have that additional 25,000. I think it would be good to get their insight on it and give them a heads up. I don't know how you go about that, but I understand they need to expect the price to go up for sure, but I think the agreement's working well together right now and it helps.
Now, are we
both of us out.
setting a year agreement? How's that being handled, Travis?
I'm sorry.
Are they signing a year-to-year agreement or is it a
Melanie,
verbal?
we did sign an interlocal agreement with them, but at the moment, I don't recall the terms as far as if it was year to year, if it was a multi-year term.
Okay.
You don't have a copy of that somewhere.
I did email the treasurer room back in September. I did let her know that health benefits are gonna go up and pay is gonna go up. I didn't say how much, but so they are aware that they are gonna increase at some measure.
Okay.
And so frankly, I mean, I was waiting again for the input of this group. They're having a budget workshop a week from yesterday. And so I'm gonna, if everyone's good with this figure, I'll make contact with their lead select person beforehand, see if he wants me to come to that budget workshop. We'll get Gary Boss and Dan engaged in that conversation as well. And Dr. Pay, if need be too. I think Dr. Pay would be very supportive of doing what we can to keep this partnership going.
So what are we gonna do with this article?
I mean, I still got my thing in there. I think we still should fund it through the town and then just in case. I mean, we don't know where the voters are gonna go for them.
And if memory serves me correctly, I think when we first proposed this to the voters in 2020, I think we did have some language like that. I mean, at the time, we were anticipating having a traditional town meeting, but in the warrant article, I seem to recall that we had something that should the town of Rome not
Right,
approve this, then the town of Belgrade would accept the full cost.
Jack, can I look at your annual report? Is that last year's?
Well, this is 2018.
We
Yeah,
have,
is
it,
that-
yeah.
No, we need the one with the gazebo on.
For the 19.
Oh,
Oh, I thought last. That we funded it fully. Yeah.
Travis would know.
So it would have been proposed.
Right.
And this one.
Right,
Yeah, you-
and it'd be in the 2019 report. Yeah, 2019 report has the 2020 warrant.
What is the question you guys are asking?
When did we do the article for
So
the,
we did the articles before COVID, because
Right.
we did not know that we were going to be going to referendum, and these articles, we just went with them. There is a no, but this was done prior to COVID, and so we didn't know it was all going to secret ballot.
Hey, Dan.
What pages, 85, 84? Because we thought it was gonna be on floor for discussion.
So that might not be allowed. Anyway, we're doing it.
No, it won't be. It's no discussion. You can't produce it. All right, to see if the town will raise and appropriate a sum not to exceed $50,000 to support the employment of a second full-time firefighter / EMS. Note, the cost of Belgrade taxpayers will be $25,000 should Rome voters also approve a warrant article to share in the cost of a full-time firefighter. Rome's approval would provide 7-day blah, blah, blah. But because yeah, but that was the articles that were gonna be done on the floor of town meeting.
That's right. It wasn't a
So
referendum
we
article.
can't put an explanatory note in because we've decided not to have a open floor
So
meeting.
you don't think that we could have a note that, as we suggest, that if Rome declines to approve the funding for half of this position, Belgrade voters would assume the full cost? You don't think that we could include that?
not on the ballot, on the
No.
secret
I
ballot?
wouldn't do so either, but then you put the whole article in jeopardy because the town wanted to fund 2 people.
Well, then, so would the other option be that if Rome rejects funding the position, then we would have to have a special town meeting to address the funding of that position?
God, I hope not.
That's what
Then
I'm
you're
trying
taking another chance again.
Right, that's what I'm trying to stop, is that, you know, let's put an expense to go, even go to, you know, having a special town meeting. Blah, blah, blah. I think is a way you can get it, just put it in the article. And I mean, I can't picture our taxpayers here in town saying no to, you know, the services that they get at this point.
The original plan was to do it that way, whether it got written that way in the article. I don't have it in front of me. The original plan was if they didn't pay it, then the voters had the right to, for the first year, that they would pay for it.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, Dan, because in the article, we've included the town of Rome's firefighter contribution as a non-tax revenue source to offset the overall budget with any unexpended balance to go to the equipment capital reserve. But we've not figured a way to word it that if it's not approved as that non-tax revenue source that we're counting on, that we're gonna be responsible for it.
So should we just consider then putting the full cost of the position in here
into the fire department,
and then,
rescue, and then
and then could we have a note that says, should the town of Rome approve this, then the total cost should be reduced by
Still,
up to.
it's still a note, though.
it's still no.
So I think the
Right.
cleanest way to do it. this
Can
is
you
me,
call it pending?
Would be take the 30,
32 and put it in.
32, have it
Add to the
go into
budget.
capital reserve. Next year in 2023, you reduce your capital reserve amount by $32,500 if Rome pays their
Well,
amount.
I mean, yeah, you could do that.
That'd be the cleanest way to do it.
That
You,
is-
you could do that, but I don't, but again, that would be reflected on the warrant.
Well, you can count on at least 25,000, can't you? From Rome, you don't have to put the whole 32,500 in jeopardy.
You can't.
Well, the way that original article was written, we were funding 2 firefighters. If Rome didn't do it.
Right.
So
We need to be.
why doesn't it just have that amount of money in the fire department budget under personnel? And then if we get reimbursed by Rome, like we should, it goes into where you're gonna put it.
And I think that was the original plan. That's why the first article was written that way.
Okay, so this one's been tweaked and we need to retweak it.
Yeah, that way we don't have all this
Right.
stuff.
Well, I think I'd look up that document that was signed between the two towns to find out.
Yeah, maybe
Just
Dan knows
really
what it is. Off the top of his
squirrely to me that this town can participate one year and not the next.
Dan, do you recall that the interlocal agreement that we signed with Rome, was that a 1-year agreement or was that a multi-year agreement?
I think it was multi, but it's still up to the taxpayers. If they opt out of it, then, what are you gonna do? They don't want to pay for it. Then that's the voter's choice, and that, there's no money there to pay us anyway. I don't believe they will, but you never know with Rome, or how things work, how voters go, they might not, but. And I believe is theirs before our town meeting?
Yeah, theirs usually happens the week before ours.
Right, so I think we knew at our town meeting that they had voted for it, but.
Well, in 2019, what happened is they had their town meeting and then we postponed ours and didn't have our meeting until
Till
July.
July, because we
Right.
put the actual figure in our.
I think do it this way and put the whole amount in, and then if Rome does, we're great. If not, and we also use the revenue from the car accidents and what was the other thing to help pay for it. So you can look at those revenues too. That goes towards that second full timer.
And we have applied that, and that's how that ordinance was written, Dan. The cost recovery ordinance is that those revenues would be applied to personnel costs.
Right.
So really, now that we've got that ordinance in place, we really don't even need that section.
So you can automatically just.
Is it
during
automatically?
Right, at the end of the year, then you just transfer those monies to the personnel costs.
Right, so personnel,
So you
yeah,
don't
the
even
additional
need to
personnel is
add
just in the
The
budget.
cost
and
of
it's
covering the
there.
revenue, because it's already been here. It was an ordinance.
Right.
Yeah, it was an ordinance. Oh, you're right.
But would you still be raising and appropriating more money to fund that than you would actually need? I mean, because at that point, you don't know at the beginning of the year how much you're gonna raise in the cost recovery. So, I mean, you could do that, Dan. But you're still gonna be raising and appropriating more money than than you may actually need by the end of the year.
Right, so we just have to have the mechanism for whatever comes in, for cost recovery or reimbursement, that it goes somewhere to offset something. You know, I mean, it's just,
Where it belongs.
I mean, the additional personnel is just part of the personnel costs. Part of your budget for personnel.
Agreed, but understand that you're still going to be raising an appropriate, so let's say that at the beginning of the year, we don't know what the cost recovery is gonna be. And so we raise and appropriate for the full amount of our personnel costs.
Mhm.
And then over the course of the year, you collect, let's say, $20,000. You've already raised and appropriated that amount, so you're not sort of offsetting that cost at that point. And since the ordinance says that that money will pay for no cost, and I have to go back and look at the ordinance. I mean, it may say the following year's personnel cost, because we wanted to make sure that we had a firm figure put into the budget each year, because that revenue source is going to fluctuate so long.
So whatever comes in this year, couldn't you use it to offset next year's personnel costs?
That's exactly
Right.
that's exactly what this is right here. So that 15,294, that's what was collected in 2021. And we're applying it to the personnel cost of 2022.
Right, so basically what we need is we need a total number of that one offsetting the following one, and probably whatever Rome is reimbursing us should be automatically in the next years.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That way it's all, we
Yeah.
know where that money's going.
True. I see what you're saying now.
Instead of waiting
So
for it to come
everything that's
in,
coming in
we have
goes
it
to
and we
offset the
apply it
following
the
year.
following
So
year.
so for 1 year, we would be funding the full cost of that.
Correct.
You are, but
You know.
you are, you guys are, but
Yeah.
you're not really.
Well, and I see, I mean, what folks are gonna look at, if we now add another 32.5 to the bottom line of that 325, 125. If this were me in a voting booth and I'm taking a look at this and I didn't have a chance to ask any questions, I'm gonna say, why did the budget go from 221.9 to 325 plus 32.5, so 350, that's a substantial increase.
Well, I think the way to handle that proposed increase to the town of Rome this year from 25,000 to 32,500 is to put the $25,000 in as it was last year. But in the meantime, negotiate with the town of Rome based on increased costs that Belgrade has, in the hope that they would recover to us some or all of it. But to set the basis for billing a higher rate next year.
Okay, so Travis was able to find the agreement with Rome and he forwarded it to me. The agreement is for a term of 1 year. It shall automatically renew each year unless each party provides written notification to the other of the intent to terminate, which we haven't received.
Is the-
Belgrade and Rome are to split the cost of a second additional Belgrade firefighter EMS provider, as well as vehicle operating costs as set forth in section 5 below. The first year cost will be $25,000 to each party. This amount will be prorated to the start date of the newly hired. Once the start date is reached, Rome agrees. Okay, so
Just gonna have to do a little more work on it, find out.
yeah, and so under this agreement, I mean, it just says that Belgrade and Rome are to split the cost of a second additional Belgrade firefighter EMS provider. Starting in, once that person is hired.
I think in the interest of long-run relationship with the town of Rome, it would be sensible to, if we have to, keep the difference for this year. And early on, relatively early on this year, set the basis for an increase of an appropriate increase next year.
I think he's already done that.
Well, clarification was 2021, a partial year, so it was 25,000, and if it had been a full year, it would have been, say, 50,000. worth of salary and truck costs?
No, 20, she was hired in late 2020.
So 2021 was a full year.
But still, per the agreement, I think I heard you say that included truck costs.
Yeah, starting at $25,000 once she was hired. So,
So you basically were prorating the first month or
Yes.
two of 2020. You had a full year in 2021.
And Nick, you did tell them that there was gonna be an increase in costs.
Yes, I told them there'll be an increase in benefits and wages. And it's, this is, be specific.
I think we asked for the full amount. and If they push back, we deal with it.
Yes.
We deal with it at that time. But if we're going to need to appropriate the full amount here, in the town, somewhere in the town report, we can explain this, correct? Not in the actual warrant
yeah,
article,
so, yes, so.
So in the
as part of
fire-
The fire department's article
right?
that, yeah, we could.
So you could even put it in bold at the bottom. We anticipate Rome's contribution to reduce what you see in the warrant. So someone looks at it, eek, and they go and read what the fire report is, they'll be very clear that it's higher because we can't commit for something that hasn't yet been voted on by the other
But I
town.
think what Dan said is a smart way to do it, and not only is you take that 32.5, and that will decrease your budget next year.
This goes back to the 2019 one, I have it out for those, but Article 30 says to vote to accept any and all overdrafts and balances that have lapsed and have not otherwise been directed to the undesignated fund, and that would apply here, I think.
So what is the majority of the big increase in the fire department? Is this the pension?
It's just personnel costs in general.
So 100
And so. when you-
140,000 in personnel
So when you
costs?
see that actual figure,
Mhm.
first of all, that doesn't include the second volunteer payroll. And I think Nick said that was about $22,000.
Yeah,
And there's still some capital items to be added to that. But part of the fire department budget was, there was $87,000 budgeted for volunteers and per diem. And so we did not make much use of per diem this year. We had trouble scheduling some of those people, but one never knows when we will need to use more per diem firefighters. And so Chief McKenzie really wanted to keep that figure the same.
But our budget didn't go up $100-something thousand. That was actual what it is now compared to what we're budgeting for. Because I got confused with that too. That's what I called Anthony about today. Correct, Anthony?
Oh, and
Yes.
see, and that's what I worry about, Dan, is a voter looking at this in the booth is not gonna have what we have for our backup data. Where it says 2020 actual, let's
Well,
just,
But that
and
number's gonna,
right.
that
and
number's
then
gonna,
is-
the final numbers aren't in yet, so that actual is gonna change before. Because we're still doing the payroll and all that, and those other expenses haven't come out of there yet.
So are you gonna be closer to 250 instead of the 221,9?
Yes. But because the payroll alone is.
Payroll alone will bump that. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And then we didn't have the per diems, which I'm hoping next year to get them back, but with COVID and everything, they were so busy at other departments. That we couldn't get them, so that's why there is. We didn't spend everything that we budgeted for last year.
See, and that's where, when I go back and I look at this 2019 town report, this was, I think, was how we were hoping to have the articles written. And what we had, the way we have them now is like a 2020 actual, 2021 actual, and 2022 proposed. What we had in 2019 was this was the budget for 2019. This was what was actually expended. This is what we're asking the voters for the current year. So right now, what we're not giving them, the way they're written, is we're not giving them what we asked for. So we're not saying that the fire department requested $305,000 and their actual expenditure was this. So then folks see, okay, so last year we asked for almost the same amount. And it wasn't all expended, and their brains can go, oh, it's COVID, maybe there was a little of this. But this is what we're asking for, and it doesn't look like as big a jump between what's actually expended and what we're requesting. Does that make sense to anyone else? Because I was thinking that's where we were trying to get back to. If I pass this over, is that what we were thinking? Because I know we were all kind of confused and we were hoping to get back to that format.
These three were the
Yeah, and that's what I brought up last year was having,
Right.
it would be 21 proposed and actual.
Right, so we can
So
watch.
every year it just shifts over.
So
Exactly,
you're talking about the format of the articles, vice.
right.
So is what I'm hearing now is that other than what we talked about previously, what you would rather have is the 2021 budgeted, 2021 actuals, and 2022 proposed.
Yes,
Do you want the two budget numbers next to each other? Do you want it to be actual budget? Or do you want it to be budget actual
We never
budget?
used that way. I mean, the actual used to be in the middle.
I'm just asking which way, because people then, if you had the two budgets together, they could see quick.
Agree, this looked confusing because I thought our budget went up 120,000 in it. It really didn't.
well, see, and
We just
that-
haven't, all the
that's what I'm-
expenses aren't in and, you know, they did look like a big increase and it was only like 20 something, 28 or something like that.
right, because if you look at it across the board this way, it looks like 185 in 2020, 221 in 2021, and then 325 for 2022. So just me going into the ballot box or filling out my thing at home, I'd be like, holy guacamole, that's a big increase. And we can't really do a whole lot of explaining on what that would be from.
Although,
But that figure
Melanie,
will
it would be
change.
185, 250, 325. So it's gonna be going up about the proportional amount
Right.
if we use this format with actual numbers.
Right.
Not that, just, it's not gonna be as big a disparity as this
The
shows.
thing is, the actual numbers have to be run.
Right, and that's what they're waiting for the auditor and all of that. But it's gonna be closer to 250 instead of 221.9.
Yeah.
Which makes the bump less.
Less, yeah.
To me, budgeting on the basis of what was budgeted in the past is less meaningful than budgeting against what was actually
Right.
expended.
Right.
But the amount expended has to be somewhere near right.
Right,
Because that's what we asked for before, was the 2020 actual, the 2021 actual.
right, but that
the
doesn't give
2022
budget,
proposed.
so.
Right.
Well, this has been explained, is that they're lacking some actual numbers. I understand that. We're working with preliminary numbers.
I need some clarification. So what do we want the format of these articles to be?
It's like 2019.
Well, that's why I want a consensus. That's
Well, I
why,
mean, yeah, and I'm just hearing two schools of
Yeah,
thought.
because that's 2020.
That's what, sir.
2020,
prefer
okay.
Could be. 21's budgeted and actual, and then 22 is
Oh, I know, yeah, I understand.
No, I-
understand what you're
yeah.
talking about.
So see who we have, this is what the
It's all
budget
we-
was.
it's all
This
we
is what
really
was
want.
actually expended. This is what
Proposed
we're
last year,
asking
and spent
for.
last year.
Yeah.
What we're gonna do this year.
Didn't mean to do that. but I did.
That's okay. But I did.
Nice shot.
So,
But isn't it more important to have the actual numbers than to have the budgeted?
Well, we'd have the actual numbers. So we'd have,
you just don't have 2 years, you
2020's
have 1 year of
budget.
actual numbers. I think the place we're having the budget number there is to give people comparison to what was anticipated the prior year and what's anticipated the coming year.
The plus of the town meeting is you can get up and explain what you're doing. With the balance, you cannot.
and if they say no, because
And
they're
if you
like,
say
if
no,
they
that's
say,
no. You-
they say that's too
That's
big of
right.
an
That part of the
increase, you're
budget goes
done.
down too. So,
And that's what I'm, that's what we're trying to avoid. I guess. What does everybody think? Go with that same format from 2019? Yes, yes.
I understood it better, went back when it was that way.
Katie, what are your thoughts?
I like that better too.
Okay, Dan says yes. What are your thoughts?
you got any thoughts on this, Katie?
No, I'm just listening.
Just listening, no thinking, just listening. Okay,
Say no.
all right, what are your thoughts,
Makes
Gary?
no difference to me. I mean, I think it probably is explained a little better though, that way, but
To do budget
I can
actual
understand.
proposed.
It's what makes the most sense to the voters is probably what you ought to do.
What you should do.
So they can understand what it is that they're voting for.
How about-
So,
how about
but it
going
seems
back
like-
to-
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean, because when that comes out, that's such a big piece there.
And I'm fine with putting the actual, putting the numbers in for the previous year.
And then the
As
actual
long as the actual
expenditure.
numbers for the previous year are right.
Yes.
And that's just it this year, that we don't know what the actual is. On that fire.
But we will by the time it's.
Yes.
Yeah, so by the time the board meets next on your regularly scheduled meeting, the 18th, that'll be the final 2021 warrant. And we'll have the actuals.
And I say we go back to like Dan was saying, the intent of the original article is the money that comes in gets,
Right.
reduces the. Oh, and get rid of this. other thing that Really doesn't make a whole lot of sense on there.
All right, so how do you want to rewrite it now to see if the town will raise and appropriate the total amount? So no. That would be, so 343.
393 minus the 17,000.
So
376.
343, 231 plus 49,794.
No, but you've
Would
got,
be
no,
393, 023. So
right, and you're gonna take out what the money we got, and you can take out the dog fees, but you're not gonna take this out. Because that's what we're discussing with Rome.
So I thought we were taking out the 32.5, we're adding it back to the town of Belgrade, and the mechanism is in place in the contract that would offset personnel costs for them, so that,
But wouldn't that be reflected up here then? That 32.5 would go to the top line?
not if we don't have it in hand. So what they're saying is take so if Rome's gives us the whole 32.5, this year we would fund the whole position.
Right.
And then now we know we have 32.5. So for 2023, we're gonna apply 32.5 towards that second firefighter. right?
Correct.
But it gives us 1 year where we're gonna be totally on the hook, just trying to set that up moving
Right.
forward with
I
Rome.
just, but that 32.5 has to go,
Back
oh, that's
in.
included already.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
included already,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So you're gonna take this 393,025 and you'll take off the recovery revenue and the dog fees, because those we know are going to come off because we've actually received them. Or we received the
We
15,294
received the 15,294.
and the dog fees, we
And the
don't
dog
know.
fees are pretty much flat.
I mean,
year after year.
Okay, so we're gonna take 17,294. So the
375.
article would read to see if the town will raise and appropriate 375,731.
Pretty much.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Mhm. Then next year you can add that other line back in down there if you want.
Right,
Use
because you
whatever
would have
we-
received the
whatever we're
money, right?
reimbursed.
And do we still
Tom's got a
want,
question over here.
with any unexpended balance to lapse into the equipment capital reserve?
You guys may tell me I'm crazy, but is it possible to put an article in that says Belgrade agrees to accept 32,500 or whatever amount is provided by Rome, if it is, and then say, this is where it's gonna go in the budget? I mean, I think it's good to have the visibility to the voter, that Rome is contributing.
Well, I wouldn't say 32.5 or whatever they contribute, because they might look at that and say, oh, we'll give them 10 grand this year. I mean,
Well-
the way that's worded, but
I'm trying to give an out if they only do the 25.
Right, up to 32.5.
The problem is, so if you give them the opportunity to pay less, they'll pay less.
they'll pay less. So
So
you
you
need
don't
to
want to do
say,
an article that will say that, because you're gonna be in the
Yeah.
boat where they could pay less.
I think you have that in the discussion under the fire or public, whatever it is, the fire department's report.
I think that's already part of it, was paying half of that second employee.
Yeah.
Right.
But we just reiterate that and
I have to read the original, what with that signed agreement, to look into it, but I'm pretty sure it says to pay half of that second employee, which includes raises and cost of living and all that, but I have to double check that. I don't have it in front of me.
Actually, Anthony just read it.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
that's what
Dan.
it says.
You're right, Dan.
And it also says something about equipment use. As part
Well,
of
I
that.
think yeah, it's our rescue, like all the oxygen and all of that, that's included in that. Because you got to figure, we did 70 calls there. You divide out the 25,000. We're paying, I know there was a question whether they were getting the money, or, if we were getting our money's worth, vice versa, but at 70 calls at 25,000, we're not paying our rescue people that much, so that it's wear and tear on the vehicle and plus supplies.
They had 70 calls,
Rescue calls.
70 rescue
Well-
calls in Rome.
Yeah, and that included some fire too, but mainly most of them are rescues. There wasn't a ton of fires.
Getting a heck of a good deal.
25 grand.
Yep.
Well, you divide that out per call. What is it? I'm on my phone, so it's a little more difficult, but
Well, how many rescue calls did Belgrade have?
Travis, off the top of your head, we had 450 calls roughly.
Yeah, bear with me. I can come up with some numbers here. 1 second.
I think they're about
As long as we had more than
20%.
75 rescue calls, it's 50/50.
Right,
That's all.
all right.
The 200s.
So we all clear how we're gonna rewrite this one?
Okay, but do we want the money to go into the equipment capital reserve?
Yes.
Okay, and then how do we get that money into the personnel piece?
Yeah.
So the way the ordinance is written
Yeah,
for the insurance cost recovery, that goes to the personnel one.
okay,
And then do we need to write a policy that says any monies that are received from the town of Rome to offset the cost go to directly for personnel costs? Right. So do we need a secondary warrant article for that moving forward?
That warrant article, is that just something that the board can do?
Right,
Yes,
that's
that's
what I'm
right.
wondering.
Policy.
Okay.
Wasn't that part of the original article from last year, though? How it was gonna work?
No, the article says to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum, and then we made a $50,000 to support a second full-time firefighter. And then we made a note at the bottom, which isn't officially part of the article, saying that half of it was coming from Rome.
Because that one was gonna be talked about on the floor of town meeting.
And then
So then, do you
And
do a
then
warrant
there's a-
article that says the contributions from the town of Rome towards the second firefighter or rescue person will be allocated? And then they vote to say, when we get that 32.5, it's going to go here, and that gives us a trail. And it also lets them know that we have money
We
coming
used to
in.
do contingency articles.
Mm.
Can you do a contingency article for the ballot? We used to do them all the time.
I would say
Right,
if
but that
Rome,
was-
if Rome doesn't
Yeah,
pay, then.
then we pay the whole thing. That's what the contingency article would say. And if Rome decides to fund it, you just forget it. You don't vote on it.
Right, and they were dependent on how the
That's-
votes
that's
from
where they
Rome
were,
balanced,
yeah.
right?
You're basically telling them they don't have to fund
And
it.
then apply it to whatever department you want.
Town Rome
You
says
have
they're
the
gonna fund
authority
it.
to accept donations and grants for and above. That's a forever article. So.
But at
Sure
that
they-
point though, Mary, haven't you already raised and appropriated? I mean, haven't you, haven't you
Yeah,
already raised?
It's
and
already gonna be raised and appropriated in the article, and we don't know what amount, we know what amount we're going to ask for or tell Rome that we want. And then they give it to us and it's a donation or.
I know,
a
but
contribution.
my point is, at that point, you can't really apply it to the cost because you've already raised and appropriated for that cost.
So as long as the board votes, as we've done in the past, we've taken funds that have come in through the fire department, and as long as the board votes to put that money towards a certain item, I think it was recovery money that came in, and they wanted it part of their working budget when I was working out back, and the auditor said, fine. We would accept that as long as it was written in the minutes and the vote was shown and a record was kept.
Agreed, but that was for a capital expense and not for an ongoing operation.
That wasn't for a capital expense,
Yeah, it
that was
was, but-
recovery money, and they wanted it into their working equipment account.
Yes, so they could purchase equipment
Right.
as opposed to paying someone's salary, which is an ongoing operational cost. And maybe I'm just confused
So-
here, but it seems to me that once the voters approve something to raise and appropriate, and if you have another article saying, and if we accept this money, well, they've already voted to raise and appropriate. And so using that 32,500, you're not really reducing the tax burden at that point.
If we set it up to use it the following year, we can use it to
Exactly.
offset the following year.
Yes.
That's what I think the simplest thing is to do.
Yes. And if that's the way that we want to do that, I agree with that.
Just fund it, raise and appropriate this year's, and then when Rome reimburses us their share, use that to offset, make sure it's set up and it's in the computer, it's set up to next year's budget gets reduced by that much
That's
money.
probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Just-
And Dan, I think you're right about, I almost think that's kind of how they did it last year. That's why I think we may be already ahead of the game without looking at the numbers and how they did it.
Dan, that's the case with cost recovery, but it wasn't the case with the monies that we received from Rome. We actually.
Oh, all right.
reduced the tax-
We need to do the same thing with Rome's money as we're doing with the cost recovery to make it simple.
I knew it sounded familiar.
Yeah, because I'm like, well, what do we do with Rome's money when it comes in for the dams? And that amount changes. It's based on a percentage,
Well, but
That's
each year
right.
that amount is budgeted.
right?
So we know at the beginning of the year how much we're getting from those other 4 towns as part of the damage.
So actually, we budget what we've got here. Minus the cost recovery that we already know about, because that's a fixed number. And that's what we put into the budget this year. And then next year, we
Mhm.
take whatever we get from Rome, plus the cost recovery and dog fees and reduce it then.
Yeah, so there'll be a 1-year hit.
Take that line out for this year and add it back in next year.
Okay. We exhausted this one? I'd like to come back to this one one more time.
We could go ahead and vote on the recommendations if anyone's. got the action.
No, I want to see it
I wanna see
written
Dan's
exactly the
file.
way it's gonna look, and then I'll vote yes or
And I have a
no.
problem with the recommendations, yes. I mean, I'd like to see the votes in there.
Well, we will once the votes have happened.
That's just a placeholder. That's a placeholder.
Yes,
That's it.
Yes.
one of my.
That's
favorites time in
subliminal,
history was
if you just keep those right in there.
But we need the final numbers anyway for actual. Before we
All right, so capital reserves, we're done with that one, right? We're renaming the fire tower one, but then there are revenues.
Those are, warrant article number 15.
I was looking for 50.
Me
That's
too. I
up
thought
there.
that's what it said.
I'm sorry.
No, it's me, not you.
No, it was me too. I thought he said 52.
My ears are getting tired.
So one thing we did do differently is we did add in the homestead exemption and the multiple revenue sharing, which, are always part of the mill rate calculation, but, we thought that would give some added transparency by including those 2 big revenue sources as part of this. Because they do help to reduce the property tax.
Homestead exemption, you think it's gonna be considerably lower this year?
No, that's just, well, I wouldn't say that's considerable. It's $7,000 less, but that's
But I
just,
mean, The other 2 numbers you got on here are fairly consistent, so.
we're just trying to be
You say you're low on
as
all of them.
conservative as
Too
possible.
conservative.
One
Yeah.
of, one of the budgeting axioms is you budget revenues low and expenses high. Say that right, Scott?
Yep. Within reason.
Within reason.
Yeah.
But the state revenue sharing is gonna go up,
The municipal revenue sharing,
right?
I anticipate that it does, that it will, Tom, but again, just being conservative because,
I guess
we're living in uncertain times.
I guess what I'm seeing is, potentially it looks like departmental costs are going up roughly 12%. So if we lowball the revenue on top of that, then potentially we're talking, 14% increase, let's say, to the taxpayer before you start juggling money around.
So, okay, so what would you propose for that line?
I mean, maybe Dan can speak to it, but everything I hear is the state's flush with cash.
Well, municipal revenue sharing is increasing by, I think 0.25%.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I know it was, they were trying to, it was trying to increase.
They're moving up to the maximum 5% allowed by law.
Yeah. The flush with cash, you're not gonna see more of that as revenue sharing. I don't think. Right now, the governor has come out with a statement that she thinks it should go back to the voters, so I'm not sure if they're gonna send checks out again, we'll see what happens.
I'll be surprised.
Well, they're flush because of all their covered.
Yeah.
Well, how about the recovery money? Is there anything that we need to take into account with this process for the recovery money that comes to the town?
Not yet,
Not yet.
not ready yet.
Excise tax. It was up $100,000 this year. We think it's going back down 100,000.
Again, Dan, just trying to be, just trying to be conservative and maybe
That's a
Melanie
big,
can help.
that's a big conservative.
Well, I mean, maybe Melanie can help educate us, but so, you know, one of the things that crossed my mind was just supply chain issues.
Yeah, prices
Don't
of
have as many
vehicles-
cars.
prices of vehicles aren't going down.
No, they're not. Last year at this time, if I sold you a crew cab pickup truck, you had a $5,000 rebate, and then usually another 1,500 if you already owned a GM vehicle. $250 right now. That's it.
But essentially, wasn't 2021 basically with supply chain issues, so I would think we could essentially level fund the proposed revenue and come in at, you know, roughly 1.8 million, is my personal opinion.
What would help me out an awful lot the next time around is if we had hopefully a one-page line, single line for each one of these articles with the bottom line data for the article with the budget and the actual for 2021 with the proposed for 2022. And the revenue and a balance struck for all of the articles except the revenue. And then the revenue separated out and the net that goes forward to the taxpayer at the bottom compared with the same thing for last year. Because that's the way the taxpayer is going to look at it when he or she stands in the booth.
Didn't you give us something like that a while back, Nick?
I don't think something exactly like that.
It would be helpful for bottom line guys like that.
Okay, so repeat that. I got lost.
Just a single line for each article with last year's proposed actual and this year's proposed. Just a spreadsheet.
The same problems as we've agreed to here.
Yeah.
Exactly the same as we've agreed to
Yeah.
here. For the bottom line for each article, with just one line for every article on a single page. With the total it has to flow through to be raised somehow or other. And then the money that's raised under Article 15 to offset that. So that the net flowing through to the tax bill compared to last year for the town, just the town, not the schools. So we can compare. Quickly.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I think I didn't provide something like that. I think I provided an extra like
You did.
payroll
Yeah.
or something like that.
So Anthony, when you did the proposed, did you do roughly 10% less? I was just trying to do it. Or
No, I mean,
You just grabbed
I
another.
didn't apply any formula
Okay.
to it. Just, again, just looking to be.
No, I understand what you did.
I think that excise tax won't come up some.
What if you did 95% of what was there last year?
Well,
How would that come out?
Bruce?
So why can't we do on the excise? So why, I mean, the figure that we have proposed right now is less than what it was in 2020 actual. And 2021 actual was $1,058,227. So why don't we go $1,008,227? Or just do $1,008,000?
Or even just
For
a million. I
proposal.
mean, I don't care.
And then I think on the municipal revenue sharing, I think we should keep it the same. Even we know is it going to be a slight increase or could be a, you know, an increase on municipal sharing, if that's the case, then I
Keep it
think
the
we
same
should
as
keep
the
that,
actual.
yeah, keep it the same as the actual.
So Scott just suggested on vehicle excise, maybe just average the two actuals from 2020 and 2021. That would yield about $987,000.
I was gonna say go to 950.
These are numbers you're just guessing at. Hopefully they'll come in near where they are, but this isn't rocket science.
Now, I know one of the things that folks have asked me too is where they find the revenue that we get from the Dalton properties.
So that flows into our facilities fund.
Yes.
And it's one of the things I wanted to mention tonight because, well, I mentioned off the top. Bruce said $7,000 cost for the uranium system at the West Fire Station. And so we have $60,000 in that facility fund. We generate about $20,000 a year from the Dalton property and revenue.
So it look like 20 on one. Dalton property has 20,000, and then I put a note, like, where's the second Dalton property? Dalton property rent revenue summary on one says percent collected 96, and so there's a $20,000 there budget net, and then that's line item 51. And is that the total between both properties that are rented?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
So we should probably have that listed as Dalton properties,
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah.
because I was looking, I put a note, like, am I missing one of them? Because I'm not seeing it.
so, I mean, again, one of the ways that we could offset some of the tax burden of the facility maintenance budget is by using those facilities, dipping into that.
Dipping
facility
into those
fund
funds.
That has $60,000.
Anthony, if you did 95% of what we did last year is $1,682,000 and change. So we'd basically be proposing 5% less than an actual. I don't know if that, but it, you know, brings up to that extra 10%. And if so, we'd have a methodology to say, we estimated 5% less, just to be conservative. Or 7%, I mean, pick what number you like, but 5% is $1,682,000, which is another $180,000 in revenue from what's showing here. Merely a suggestion, as they say.
Well, what do we think, guys?
Really, what I was getting at when I suggested this is just the municipal portion of the sheet that we fill out every year for the tax, to derive the tax rate.
Right.
Just the municipal portion of that, which takes all the municipal costs, less the revenues. And whatever else goes into it to come to a tax rate. But this would just develop the municipal portion of the tax rate proposed versus last year. That's what people are interested in when they go to the voting booth. How's it going to affect my tax rate?
Right. Can we include something like that?
In, on like a warrant article or like in like
Or-
a treasury report or something like that in the annual report?
Yeah, can we include that sheet that we use to come to the mill rate in the town report?
Oh, golly,
I don't
well,
think,
I mean, I think that we do put the sheet that we use this year, in there, don't we, Mary?
I think we have done it in the past,
Yeah.
we don't do it every year,
Yeah.
we have put the calculation sheet in the report.
Yeah, but that's from the prior year. So the 2021's calculation sheet.
yeah, and that calculation uses school information as well. I don't think it like breaks it apart. It's all
Yeah,
just one.
it's
sheet.
not municipal, it's the total tax.
Right,
Right.
it doesn't break it.
Yeah.
This is municipal and stuff.
Yeah. Just the municipal portion.
Well, I don't think there's a calculation sheet just for municipal. I could use old school numbers, maybe. And see
No,
what that.
forget about school, forget about the county, just the municipal.
Right.
Am I being overly simplistic? You eliminate item number 11 and subtract the rest of the revenue from your total expenditures, and that's the amount to be
That's
raised by
the, that's
taxes.
the idea.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah, if you just, I thought you wanted like a mill rate increase. You just want that.
Well, you can compare it, once you get that answer, to what happened last year.
Right.
Right. Yeah, yes, I follow.
And now the other 55,000 in revenue. So we'll look at the bottom for 2022 initial request. There's 55,000 more in revenue that we're not reflecting here. Is that going to the undesignated fund? On page 84. Total revenue, 2022 initial is 1,555,000.
wouldn't part of that be that recovery money? Or no?
I don't see
That's part of
recovery
total
money
revenue.
under here.
And then
Here's some cost recovery, stuff, is that what you said?
Yeah, because that's not listed here under revenue.
Yeah, so there are some things on like tree growth reimbursement. So that's not part of this. I mean, we could put it as part of it. But it is included in the mill rate calculation. Whenever we do that. Same thing for, veterans exemption.
And it looks like that also includes rec programs.
Also, Mel,
Yeah,
if you look down at the bottom of that page, we had a fund for the tower still in 2019,
I see that. But it says Rome.
because Rome contributes $300.
oh, we're
to that tower.
contributes to it, yeah.
So.
Money's supposed to be going
It's-
to that.
I think we
Money's
need
gonna be
to-
there somewhere.
Well, it
yeah, I
looks
think
like
we need
money
to
went in
look into that a little bit
2021.
more. Maybe when the auditor comes.
Yeah, definitely, I'll ask for it.
Well, and it looks like money went in 2021.
And it used to be Sydney too, but then Sydney got the wrong.
Old frequency.
Because it used to be $600 that we get annually.
Yeah, so I guess we need to know how much money's in that account.
Or if it's just going into the general fund.
I think that's what's happened, because it would have went 2017, for whatever reason, it got expunged, this just never got picked up after that. So you have to recreate it, or.
Have to recreate that account. So anyway, back to 15, if we get to change these numbers, have Anthony go back through and add some money back in.
I mean, I kind of, I'd like to see that the excise up in the $1 million range, I think. And I still think municipal revenue sharing should be kept the same.
Well, I mean, what Carol has suggested makes sense to me. Why don't we just do that?
What was it at 95%?
95% of last year.
So, and then up in the warrant article, I'm wondering if it's right where it says, see if the town will appropriate. They might want to add the word estimated revenues. I mean, that's what these are, is estimated revenues.
So we are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So that people understand if something changes in the middle of the year, it's an
Yeah.
estimated revenue.
good idea. Yeah, well, I'm wondering, Tom, if we're at Article 15 now, Article 16. I know you had sent an email about the software for the code enforcement officer. I don't know if everybody has seen it. I know we're moving this forward as if we're purchasing it. But you raised some good points in your email about holding off on the purchase and why.
My concern was, if you look at last year's town report, it says there were 87 building permits approved. And 8 of those were for single-family homes, 4 were for seasonal dwellings. So basically, you're talking 12 homes. And then you're talking 42 additions and alterations, 29 garages and shed, and 4 mobile homes. So my concern is that the software is basically overkill potentially for the job. And that it might be better addressed with better filing systems or better attention to detail with essentially either a manual system or taking the building permits and basically scanning them into a PDF file where they're indexed both by, say, the property reference number on the tax bill, as well as the permit holder, various items like that. And that would give a database potentially to the planning board. And it also allows people to go back and scan old building permits and as far back as you want.
Bruce?
My only thing on 16 is I don't see anything, any line item for plumbing inspector.
Oh, so so it's built into the code enforcement officer.
That should be a separate line item. Or it's gonna be a separate
Well, in the
person.
past, we've done CEO/LPI, and just to make it fit on the line, I just reduced it to CEO.
Only reason I'm saying, because it's gonna be 2 different people, correct? Or am I wrong
Yeah.
on that?
At this point, yeah,
So it should
until
be,
he gets his,
right, so it should be two separate line items. And the other thing is how you're gonna fund that. Because the plumbing permits are set by the state, which is $10 a fixture. You're not gonna make enough money on plumbing permits to fund that position, fund the time for that. How other towns and municipalities I've checked with, how they fund the plumbing inspector side of it, is they increase the building permits to fund the plumbing inspector side.
well, we were talking about changing our building permits and stuff, restructurings and fees anyway.
Yeah, it's the only way you're gonna be able to recover fees for.
So you'd like to see the plumbing inspector pulled out, so code enforcement would go down, plumbing inspector would be added, but the bottom line would end up being the same.
Yeah, I think it should be to keep it clean, where you're gonna have, it's gonna be 2 separate entities.
Is revenue from the recycling center, whether it's fees collected for demo wood or bottles or sales of scrap iron and scrap metals and sales of plastics and newspapers and so forth, is that kept right within the solid waste account? Yeah. So it's operated like a business.
Well, and it looks like what we're saying moving forward in the budget is that there will be no recycled waste sales. And the revenue stream of
No.
2022, there's nothing proposed.
In Article 20.
So there's a $40,000 total, but in our breakout, it does not reflect any. Says waste disposal fees year to date for 2021 was 22,286 and recycling waste sales was 37,387. But waste disposal fees, as far as on the revenue side, says 40,000 is just under waste disposal.
Right, so that's just how the article has traditionally been written. So I'm just sort of following the template. And again, did increase that just to help reduce the tax burden, assuming that we're going to be, instead of letting money lapse into the solid waste capital reserve, we'll be pulling money from the undesignated fund to build that reserve.
What article is
That's
that?
Article 20.
Well, second Article 20, because we have
Oh,
1920, 1920.
That's been a good year.
Oh, gotcha. That's why it was confusing. Thank you.
It's the second 20.
So it's above library.
So Anthony, on the solid waste revenue, Ken was comfortable to keep that amount of the recycling revenues dropping drastically?
Well, so we collected $61,000 this year in total revenue first. And so that's why I reduced it to $40,000, just out of the concern that the recyclable market has as of late.
Correct, and we were getting paid record money, and I think you're awful conservative on that. I think you should probably even drop another 10, but it's just on my procedure, being involved in recycling that, where we are for numbers right now. No
So you think it'll be, you would anticipate it'll be half of what it was this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we haven't finished up on Tom's.
No,
I mean, I also think, you can use Excel worksheets to keep track of the permits, keep track of the plumbing, keep track of revenue, et cetera, et cetera. I'm worried that basically the new code enforcement officer is gonna spend more time trying to get the software working on the job, essentially.
But does the software include all of that reporting?
It does. So in my mind, the benefit of this, I talked to a code enforcement officer who uses this and has used it in 3 different towns that he's worked in. It's just the efficiency that can be mined from. Because all of it, as if the code enforcement officer goes out into the field, does inspections, investigations, whatever the case might be, then that person has to come back here and do all the paperwork that Tom is talking about, as opposed to doing it right there in the field on a tablet. And then that information can be sent to the permit holder or whoever's under investigation or the applicant or whatever. So that they're able to receive that right there as again, as opposed to coming back, typing up an email. I just view it as a way to make it more efficient and to congregate information in a way that's going to be easily sortable. I think more sortable than scanned PDFs.
And the cost of the software?
So it's a $2,500 initial fee, and then it's a $3,500 subscription.
yearly.
So how does the planning board use that information?
Well, I think that one of the concerns that was raised by the comprehensive plan committee this year is that we don't have any sort of record keeping to know what the rate of compliance is for our permits, or are we really getting our money's worth out of the code enforcement officer? I forget how many years ago it's been now, but we increased those hours from 12 to 25. And we don't really have any data as to whether or not, we've seen a return on that investment. And I think having this sort of system helps to provide that data that will allow us to better analyze whether or not, our code enforcement is working the way that we want it to.
Well, I guess my concern was, is this really going to help that you have a code enforcement officer and they get a building permit and it says it's not in shoreline zoning, for example, but it's obvious that it really is. If you bother to look at the tax map, let's say, is it going to cure that issue? Or if the permit person puts on the permit, it's not in a subdivision, and it actually is the software is basically not going to necessarily have the code enforcement officer.
Well, neither is the paper.
Well, that, which to the point is there a process or a procedure manual?
The issue
That
with
states-
with a system is continuity, at least in my mind, because you're gonna flip over code enforcement officers, right? You just, unfortunately had a death, right? So when the new person comes in, you're assuming that they're gonna use the same exact methodology in naming those PDF files. And actually that they're gonna convert the PDF files without making a typo, right? So when they go to search the network for this file, that they're gonna find it. What I see with, I'm dealing with this at the county right now. Things on Excel, things on Word documents, things on PDF are all great if you can find them. So say your code enforcement officer's out and he gets in a wreck, okay, and he can't come to work, who's gonna be able to find that information the way, in his mind, it made sense to file that? With a system, you have to constrain to how it's programmed. And to Anthony's point, hopefully it'll be able to produce reports for you so that you can answer those questions that you have. You're not going to be able to do that with a PDF unless you go through each document and research.
And that's one of the things that the system does offer is I'll be able to go in and see, have the follow-up inspections been done? We've gotten a complaint about this. Where are we in the process of investigating this? What is the documentation been to a certain point? And
Yeah.
so,
I mean, if you want to know how many permits were issued, and I don't know much about it, but a system, he should be able to go in there and print a report to tell you, what he's been doing all year, who's compliant, who isn't, who the violators are, how much was collected, all that kind of stuff. Other than a spreadsheet that they would have to sit and put all this information in manually, you're not going to come up with that.
Well, it's like, my concern is, given the volume of permits, it's an expensive
Well,
system, basically.
I don't know, the area is growing. I mean, we've been here 15 years and I just know in our area, I don't know how many houses have been built over there. So, and coming from New York, where I watched basically when 9/11 happened, everybody in New York moved up to our area. And now, I think when we left, the population was probably 20, 30,000. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 50 or 60 now. And we also had a huge Hasidic population move in. So you never know when that's going to happen. So, I think a little planning for the future at a cost of $8,000 or whatever it is.
6,000.
I don't know. To me, I understand what you're saying. There may not be that much activity. So I don't know how many permits or how many things it goes on.
there's more than 100 this year. Do you recall what the number was? Mary?
It was over 100, and
Yeah.
actually,
But,
it was a higher number than we
Yeah.
have had in the past 5 years.
yeah, but we're talking about history too.
So the thing is that we are working on taking care of those files right now, because those are the issues that we are having. There are files that have been scanned into PDF. They were scanned in and then they were named by map and lot. They were named by the person who put
Yeah.
them in. They were named by the applicant. So what we're doing right now, so I'm not sure how that's going to work with this new program, is that we are taking all of the assessing files, because assessing the map and lots don't change.
Right.
They do go away when properties are consolidated, but they don't change. Names change over time. So we're taking all the building and plumbing permits, and we're taking and we're putting them in by map and lot into the assessing file. So basically, we're creating one folder for that property.
For the
So
property,
somebody
yeah,
can go
that
to
makes
that
sense.
folder and they can say, okay, they had a plumbing permit, in 10 years ago. And what happened, who did it, and where is it located? Right now, they're all over the place here, and it is crazy. So
Yep.
I'm not sure how that system is gonna work with what we're doing right now, because is that gonna be on the U drive? Is it gonna be accessible? Are we gonna continue? Because we're putting a lot of work, effort, and money into what we're doing right now.
It's a web-based system.
It's a web-based system. So there's no paper.
Just an idea, when I usually go look for software systems, I try to get other municipalities in on the deal. And then I say to the vendor, if I can get more people to buy in on this, we give us a discount. So another option just to throw out.
My big concern about code enforcement is that the code enforcement in this area, the Belgrade Lakes area, is done on a town by town basis without any real discernible coordination. And nature doesn't care about that when it comes to lake water quality. Nature looks at the watershed system. Really, the code enforcement should be coordinated throughout the system.
You wouldn't argue that.
I don't have a big problem with going to this kind of software, because I think, say Peter Rushton needs to come in and take a look at it. He should be able to get into that system and click on what he wants to see and go back and look and see what the code enforcement officer's done without having to go back and start.
Do other municipalities, excuse me, do other towns use this?
Yes.
A big number of them?
So this company is based in Utah, but they have expanded into Maine. There are a number of Maine towns who are using it, and it was Dave Savage who was the one who said, you guys really ought to check this out.
And your hired CEO knows how to use it?
Well, I mean, we've talked with him about it, and we think that he's technologically proficient and would be able to use the software.
To me, it looks
He's
like
not
if
a
we're
code
building
enforcement
for the
officer yet,
future,
so.
It's
Yeah.
we
expensive.
need to be.
Well, and I think probably my only hesitation with it is, I mean, part of learning is learning all of the process. It's not learning how to enter information into a handheld device that then is going to do all of the work for you. And do we want somebody who's so new in the position learning all the shortcuts before you, it's like learning how to walk before you crawl. Should they learn all the processes about how those go and then have a system that where you can be issuing things on the fly? I don't want somebody who's not fully trained determining 2 months down the road that all your requirements are met, this permit is issued, and then maybe they should have come back to the office and reviewed some other data and put some more into it.
Does training come with the software?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
So the idea of having the software come in the same time the guy comes in might not be a bad idea.
Right.
Right.
I think that
You learn the
sounds like a great idea.
software as you go along. It's probably not a
I
bad
think, I
idea.
think the future, that's the way everything's. gonna
That's the
go.
way it's going to
Right,
Rather
be.
than learn it one way and then have to relearn it another way.
Right.
And if we talked just briefly about looking at changing our cost, the building permit fees, that we could certainly do that in a way that would cover the $300 a month that this will cost us in fees. I mean, you could incorporate whatever we change for building fee and say, we need to increase it by X amount, an extra $15 or $20 or whatever, so that we can make sure that this is a zero cost to the town.
Yeah.
There are ways
Well,
to
and
get that back.
I would like more information on it. Like, what is the system? What does it look like?
Well, how long have they
Like-
been in business?
Right, how long?
Are
have
they a
been in business?
startup
How
or
many
gonna
more
sell
towns
next
are
week to
using it?
somebody else and a whole bit, yeah.
One of the things that I always recommend is go to another municipality that is using it. And talk to them about it, how they like it, the type of reporting they're getting. And the user will tell you how the system performs.
Right.
And
What he said.
yeah, and
But
to,
basically Dave Savage is
Yeah.
the municipality, the code enforcement officer for Oakland is telling us.
Right,
How long has Dave been using this, do you know?
They're just starting up themselves.
So,
but I think Melanie brings up a good point. It's just not the software, it's the training that the code enforcement officer needs. So, the other part of that is, and what organizations do they belong to that for code enforcement officers, the type of training that's offered, they should be engaged with that. I know when I started talking to Nick, I recommended to he and Anthony to join GFOA. Because it's an accounting group, they deal in governmental accounting, so Nick can get trained in what governmental accounting is. It's not a checkbook. A lot of people make this big mistake. They think anybody can come in and do governmental accounting. It's fairly complex because it deals with funds, it deals with federal funds, it deals with other special revenue. And there's a lot to it. So training, I'm big on training. So, and that's why I suggested they join GFOA. No different for the code enforcement officer.
But whether they're doing it manually or whether they're doing it on a system, they still need to have training and they still need to
Absolutely.
make sure.
When he's on the site, he's observing,
Right.
and that's where the training comes in,
And I think you could control that by saying you're not going to be able to, don't issue on the fly for the first X amount of time until you've got, I mean, there's a period of
Right, I
time.
think I'm just trying to see, like, if we're approving this purchase, it's written in as if we are, and if we are approving it, what are the parameters? This is that, we don't slide anything through at the last minute as we're all tired at 8 o'clock at night, and then we're like, whatever, just sign the bottom line.
I mean, I think your point's well taken. I think you're more concerned about what this person knows to do their job than software. That would be my first concern.
And I also want to make sure that the information is accessible to more than just that one person. Who else has access to it? If the planning board chair needs to look something up, if the vice chair, if the town clerk needs to use that. It cannot be one person has access and that's.
On a central location, because we
It's
field a lot of calls out front.
it's web-based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the cloud.
Yeah,
You'd be
and,
able to look it up.
and even if it was on a network, you just give people access, that's all. And there's no login.
Oh, at this point, no one, it's part of a warrant article that doesn't specifically spell it out.
Yeah.
Right,
So why don't we leave it in? We can discuss it as select board if we decide we want to use it. If we don't, the money doesn't have to be spent. I
Right,
mean, it's not,
yep,
absolutely.
But I would certainly recommend going to another municipality and seeing the software.
let's see what it can do.
You may get there and find it junk.
right, Oakland may be like, whoo, sold you guys a bill of goods,
Yeah.
good thing you guys didn't
Right.
sign on.
You might find out if they're based in Utah, you might call places out there and 3/4 of Utah's using it.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know.
Well, it's a niche market. I mean, it's a tiny little area.
Let's tackle recreation. And is Annie or anybody from recreation gonna be here?
No.
And Linda was going to try. She thought, but I have not seen her get on.
As I mentioned at the beginning. Use all the operational. stuff. Back to 2019. Part-time person, the assistant there answering the phones and so forth, and all the other. School and summer camp counselor, that's just really driving the cost increase.
Well, I think there's some other stuff here too. This, well, because just the salaries alone, the budget was 80,000, last year was 53, we're now asking for 101.
Well,
But
I think
then
keep in
we-
mind, we didn't fill a lot of positions.
Right, no, I know, but that's part of the reason why it'd be nice if somebody were here from the recreation department, because one of the things that we asked in hiring the new rec director was some ideas for new programming, but essentially what is here under their projects is the same programming that was there previously, except this $5,500 increase for the music program. And the other question that I had was that we have an expenditure, hold on, is it $4,700 for contractor? Is it contracting consultant service or whatever, for yoga? Hold on, is that over on this one?
So that was what we, back in 2019, that's what we actually spent.
So what I'm trying to figure out is it says there's $4,500 in contract services on yoga instructors. So how is that an expense to the town if the yoga folks write a check to the town, but then the town pays the yoga instructor? Why is that not a wash and it's costing us $4,500?
Well, but understand a budget consists of two sides of the ledger, the expense side and the revenue side. And so those revenues coming in, that's the revenue side, but you still have to reflect the expense.
How,
on the expense
what would
side.
the expense be to the town besides having the space open at a time when it's normally open?
Well, if we're the ones paying the instructor, that's the expense. So we don't just take the check from the
So it
resident.
is a wash.
Yeah,
You should see on the revenue sheet, a income. I don't know if it's there or not.
and it's not broken down. We have traditionally, all of our recreation revenues have gone into one line.
One recreation program fees,
Yeah.
Yeah.
35.
And what happens if Annie wants to start a new program?
Well,
We've allocated no money for that.
Well, it's like everything else, Melanie. It's a matter of priority. So if she wants to start a new program, then she's gonna have to spend less on something that's in the budget in order to afford something that's not.
And then the other question, you and I talked about it briefly last night, and I spoke to Annie about it, the gym floor cleaner.
Yeah.
Is that reflected somewhere?
It's not, because that's a capital cost. This is an operating budget, and that's a capital cost. So if we were going to purchase a new gym floor cleaner, we would probably do that out of the recreation capital reserve.
We've not done it that way previously.
Well, I mean, it's a piece of equipment, like a skid steer.
Yeah.
Cleaning machine.
Yeah, it's, and so a piece of equipment would be considered a
How much
capital
is that?
expense.
Unless
Well, it
the
depends.
capital reserve is set up for something specific. It isn't just a catch-all.
Well, I understand, but it's the recreation capital reserve is for capital items related to recreation,
Yeah, but capital policy.
Huh?
You have a capital policy.
not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, okay, because normally what happens is you have a capital policy and you set a threshold. And anything over 5,000 is a capital item. And anything under is expense. So I don't know what the cleaner costs, but that's usually consideration. Usually also in a capital reserve, there's some uncommitted funds in there for emergencies. So I don't know how you got it set up, but you could take it from there. Depending on what the cost of this thing is.
And the cost that I've heard thus far range from 900 to 6,000.
So do we have an equipment capital reserve here?
No, there's an equipment line item in that budget, right?
5,000.
Right, I have old numbers and new numbers. Yeah.
It's already taken
Well,
care
we
of.
could, but that's gonna raise the budget by another $6,000.
Yes.
And there's already concern about what the bottom line is.
It's already raised the revenue by 100,000, so you're covered.
So what is 6,000? I mean, it's a little piddly amount of money you're talking about. I'm not serious.
Well, I think the challenge with recreation is that because there's such a bump in personnel,
It's
And the personnel
difficult because
costs.
you didn't do
the
anything
people are
last
going to
year.
go, "Ah." And,
Yeah,
the
Yeah.
base cost of the building, all of that is under,
You have a new director down there.
Yeah.
It's a difficult proposition.
so,
We had no programs last year,
and we've had the children. Yeah.
no programs.
You just don't know.
Yeah, you have no idea what this is gonna be like anyway.
Exactly.
Could be worse than last.
That's right. Well, what you can say is that what you don't spend, you put in a reserve specific for, or use it to reduce the taxes in the subsequent year. That's sort of a double-edged sword, but could make that argument.
Well, doesn't unspent money from the rec program go into its own account?
own capital reserve. So, you know, and we are mindful, I mean, we got the design on that addition for the rec center, for the storage, and then sort of repitching the roof, the way that the ice comes off the roof there near the kitchen. And, you know, back when that was designed, which was right before I arrived, I mean, that was a $50,000 project then. So that's one of the things that we're trying to build the capital reserve toward, is to be able to fund that project at some future point.
Any other thoughts on that? We're on to flexible spending accounts.
And again, if the town wants to participate in that, the cost of the administration would be about $2,000.
Or you can do what the state does and pass the cost off to the employee.
Well, and the benefit is it's a pre-tax program. That's the benefit to the employee.
But they need to understand that if they don't use it, they're gonna lose it.
Right.
And are there any other ones that are less
How would they
expensive?
lose it? Money they contribute.
So for example, say you put $2,500 in, right? And that begins on January 1st. And say they leave in March, but they haven't really accumulated $2,500 worth of medical bills to submit against that, or even for the year for that matter. You know, if they don't submit on time, and there's a window, you get so much time after the year ends to submit, they could lose it.
That's why you'll see,
It's a reimbursement.
Yeah, I know what it is, but that's confusing me because if they're putting the money in out of their paycheck,
Yeah.
you can't lose it.
Yeah,
You
you
do
can.
if you don't
It
spend
goes
it.
into, the way the state works is you get a debit card and you can use it to pay as you go. But say, for example, like, you know, I don't know, let's just pick a random number. You put $5,000 in. Again, I forget, I don't know what the cap is, do you know?
I don't.
Yeah, so you put 5,000 in, but you only incur $4,000 worth of qualifying medical costs. You've lost $1,000.
It's not the way it works where I work.
No,
If I-
that's.
The only thing I lose is if I leave the company, I can lose the company contributed money if I have them do it. Anything I put in can come back out and then I have to pay the taxes on it, which, because it's a tax deferred account.
Yep, I know with the state plan, if you put so much in and you don't, you know, submit your bills against that to qualify against the plan, you could lose that difference. Now,
Gotta check on
Which
that.
is why they allow you to do stuff like,
what's
they
that?
give you this weird little list of like, you could buy Band-Aids and use your FSA
Yeah, right.
money. And you can get
That's why I stopped
Head and
doing that.
Shoulders,
Yeah.
whatever, shampoo.
Yeah,
or
so-
whatever.
that's why at the end of the year, they
Band-Aids.
keep saying, do you have FSME money to use? You know, your eye doctors and all of those are.
When
pushing.
I moved to Maine, I was contributing. And then they told me that, nope, after you left, you can't, so that was that.
Yeah.
And it may be different. I don't know, they may have different plans, the way they administer it, but I'm pretty sure you lose it. You don't,
Similar.
you don't apply for it.
Well, we can follow up with the
Yeah, take a
administrator.
look and see how.
Yeah.
it's-
All right. So we'll get a little more research done on that before we sign on.
I don't have a problem with leaving that $2,000 in the budget for now. Again, we'll pull it back out, but
Yeah.
You know how much interest there was from the employees?
I don't think it's been
talked about.
talked about, the employees about it.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about it here with the employees yet.
Yeah, I
because-
mean, you may want to ask just to get an idea if they're even interested. Because I think I heard Bruce, was it you that said you,
I did, we had it for a
Yeah.
year. and it was horrible.
I have mine and I just take, mine's minimal. I'm like, I think I have $10 a week that comes out. And I'm like, yeah, when I hit it, I hit it. I'm like, but I'm like, then I don't have to play the game.
just something to think about before you go down the road. maybe.
We don't get a debit card or anything like that with us. Because they're not paying that extra fee. So it's $875 annually, $555 per account that's open. And $18 per participant if you offer them a debit card.
Right, when I did the calculation, it came up to like 1,800 something. We just said
That's if everybody.
that's if everyone got a debit card, everyone, signed up,
Yeah.
everyone knows eligible.
All right, legal services, so 12,000 for a fixed cost contract. 12,000 for anything where the town is involved in litigation. And then 12,000 for planning board actions that require legal assistance. Correct?
Well, and that legal assistance would be litigation. So,
Litigation.
so for instance, if we wanted the town attorney to come and participate in crafting a findings of fact for particularly complex permit applications, that's covered under our general legal services.
What if somebody sues us?
Yeah.
Sues.
And most of our litigation has been as a result of some action involving the plan.
Right. Bruce?
Do we know how much we had expended on just litigation this year? And how much was for looking over legal stuff for the town office? And the select board? Do we know, do we have a separate dollar amount?
No, it's all one line item.
Yeah, well, we had a legal services line item in the general government budget. That was it $35,000, Nick?
Yeah, it was,
And so we expended that.
it was 40,000, 41 basically, illegal.
Does that include what we charged to the planning board?
This planning board had another 2,500, so that's what, 43,500.
Yeah.
And then the select board had 75 come out of theirs, so what's that, 51,000?
So I guess what I'm getting at is, my concern is yes, we budgeted with a firm for $12,000 for a flat fee to do a lot of stuff. Well, how much of that $53,000 was that $12,000?
Well,
A lot.
15,000 of it shouldn't happen again this year.
A lot.
So that's a good chunk, which puts us back closer to the 35,
My
36,000.
concern, because that was the thing I brought up at several board meetings, is that we were way over that budget line, and, I hate to see that happen again this year, if we can help that.
You can never guess.
No.
That one's one that's gonna, could be a huge amount, could be almost nothing.
Well, I don't remember, we thought 15,000 was like freaking highway robbery that we were gonna charge the
I think
taxpayers that to
that's-
pay for an
That's a
attorney.
couple hours, maybe.
Yeah, and now we're like,
And if it makes anyone feel any better, I've already put like 3 assignments on Phil Socher's plate, so.
and he's just handed that to a paralegal.
Yeah, you'll learn that up.
We were talking about that ordinance, some Gary ordinance or whatever it was last night.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah, if it doesn't need a heavy lifter, it just needs a legal review. All right, so we comfortable with that? 36,000, does that seem? Okay, custodial, one of the things I've noticed is there is nothing in the proposal from Made for You for their custodial stuff for North Belgrade. And then I didn't see cleaning fees encompassed anywhere else for North Belgrade. But I also worry that if we're considering utilizing North Belgrade more for a senior center, it's gonna need to be cleaned. And I also, one other thing that just popped into my mind that I want to make sure is, I've had 2 complaints of mice being seen
Yeah.
in the rec facilities, so we want to make sure that if Modern Pest is not coming as timely as they should, but we've also got to try to figure out where the mice are coming from.
So you're right, Melanie, we don't have something from Made for You, but I thought that when we had talked about before that the preference was to hire someone versus contract with someone.
Well, but I want to make sure that that's still going to be part of whatever we're doing.
You mean cleaning North Belgrade?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so if we were to hire someone, yeah, so that person, part of that, their weekly duty, you go there. Because obviously, it gets you at least on a weekly basis, and with senior resources, that gets you more often than that.
And the custodial position would be part of what other position?
So,
That's part of your list up here.
so because our code enforcement officer is going to be working in building maintenance, maintenance for both health might get the transfer station right now. But I sort of view that position as being a bit of a utility input, where if we need them at the transfer station, that's where that person would be. If we need them position with building maintenance, that's what we would do. And then they would always have. that they have to attend.
The only problem I see with that, we've done that in the past and it doesn't work. So, because we've tried to do this switch, have a half an employee do part of facility maintenance in the transfer station, it doesn't work. The facility maintenance either robs them when the transfer station's open and busy and needs them, or vice versa. So it's a tough one. that-
I think if you're gonna do it, you're gonna have to have somebody that's gonna be designated for cleaning. And
Right.
once they get done for the week, if there's time left over, you're gonna sign them somewhere else.
Right.
But I don't think you're gonna be able to split, say, all right, you're gonna be here 16 hours,
Exactly.
because
It's not gonna work.
And Bruce, I mean, my impression right now is that we've got the staff that we need, the staffing that we need on Wednesdays and Saturdays at the transfer station. So my impression is that we need some more help perhaps on the off days when it's not open.
Well, because don't they also work on Mondays and Thursdays?
Sorry.
Don't they, when the facility isn't open, aren't they also there Thursdays doing some sorting and things like that?
Who's this person supervising? Who supervises this person?
Well, I think ultimately it's sort of maintenance.
So the biggest thing in the winter months, you're full staff.
No,
See, winter months, the transfer station's fully staffed right now, because you got Wesley that's working there in the winter months. In the summer months, you're understaffed, because
Understood.
Wesley goes back to facility maintenance,
and trying to find someone to work part-time.
16 hours a week is almost impossible.
Mhm.
if we hire somebody to clean that up, I think having facilities maintenance.
Okay.
super-
So-
good job.
So what, I mean, what's the pleasure of the board? There's a little bit of hesitation, so, you know, we want to go with Made for You. She called, left a message for me today. I can call her back, or do we want?
I honestly feel like one of the things that I brought up, and we're starting to get it on the whiteboard, is that we need a schedule for everywhere in town. What needs to be done, when it needs to be done, so that there's not ever a question of making sure that stuff is being done when it should be. I mean, we've talked about how when I came in the morning and the floors were being mopped as staff was arriving, and the floors are staying wet. Total OSHA, oh hell no. And bleach was being used, and then you have the folks are breathing in, things like that. Like, I want to be sure that whatever we're doing, it's being cleaned in the way that it should be. that it's being done on a regular basis, that there's no question of whose job it is to do each piece of that. Because we have some really nice buildings, but if we don't stay on top of stuff, they're not going to be nice buildings. Because stuff is going to deteriorate, it's gonna look crappy, people aren't gonna wanna rent it if it looks this way or that way. You know, so I almost lean towards having a professional come in who does this contracted service with other towns who've given glowing recommendations. And I would say, you know, this is what we feel like needs to be done. What do you see that we're not seeing? But just to be sure that we have got something every single week that's being done where it needs to be done. Does that make sense? to
I'd be in
everyone?
favor of using a contractor.
Because I
at
feel
this
like if
point.
we give some of this to this person and then that doesn't pan out, or, you know, maybe the CEO decides maybe he doesn't want to be a floater on this other end. Then we're back to not having someone do the routine cleaning.
So what do you do when you start renting out facilities? If you have rent out, say, the Center for All Seasons a couple times on the weekend. How are you gonna deal with the contractor to come in and clean that on odd days or something?
So, you
I would
know,
imagine that they'd be happy if they know about it.
right,
I mean,
How
I'm
do
sure
you
they'd be
budget
happy to
for it?
provide
How
additional
do you,
service.
yeah, how are you gonna budget for it? How are you gonna, I mean, a lot of cleaning places, they want a schedule.
Right.
So, I mean, I call them up and say, okay, next week I had somebody come in and, but the following week, and we're booking 2 more days. What happens if they don't have somebody that's available?
well, do we have a contracted cleaning service come in and do the routine maintenance on all the buildings? But then if you happen to have 2 rentals back to back and the trash needs to be taken out in between or whatever, then someone who works for the town can be responsible for.
I guess I look at cleaning the community center, which is a big building. And they're only gonna charge $125 a week. That's not a lot of money. I mean,
You know what?
when I get my house cleaned.
You know
Say,
what?
I pay that from now.
You know what? That's North Belgrade. It just occurred to me that, and they gave us a previous pricing for the Center for All Seasons. And I don't recall what that is.
Oh, that's North Belgrade?
Yeah, I have to go and get it. That's North Belgrade.
Okay.
That's why it's a good deal.
Yeah,
I was gonna say 125, I mean, I think
That is
175 here is a
It's a lot
good
of money
deal.
for the community center.
It seemed like, God, I thought she was like 275 a week
That, Melanie, that sounds about right.
for all of them, and that she would hit this one and do this, this, and this, and then hit this one and make sure this, and this was done.
Oh, no, I'm thinking 275 for the. community-
Just the
for
Just the
Community
community center.
Yeah, so by the time you
I
do
bet you're talking
275, which is what,
$900 a week.
450 and another
So you better
buck
off
and a
hiring
quarter,
somebody.
675, you're up to about
Mm,
700 a
hire
week.
Have you got a contractor that'll do this?
Yes.
You do.
But we don't have to pay
He needs to be
benefits.
so lost.
And what was their total bid?
Oh, let me, I have to calculate.
Right here.
So what I'll do is I'll upload it, look at it and send it.
Yeah.
I'm sure the statute still. in effect.
Yep. And see if they've replaced that tax thing with anything else.
So down here, it talks about the money rolls over. from year to year.
Yeah, see, the one I have to use it by the end of it. So what they do is, we use one called Wage Works.
Yeah, this one rolls over year to year. So it's kind of like what I have in my HSA.
Well, and I
Yeah, I
think
think
there's,
we've had cleaners in here before. We've hired cleaners for this building.
yep,
And it didn't work out terribly well, I don't think.
So you're talking about, and I just used 250 for the cleaning of the Center for All Seasons. We're talking about nearly $34,000 a year, which, you know, would be cheaper than paying someone salary.
But if you need extra cleaning, I mean, 34,000, or you have an employee that is designated to do, I think,
and then if we hire her, does she bring her own equipment? Do we
Yes.
provide the cleaning supplies? So then that cost is also,
Right.
would come off the town.
She would bring it.
Yeah. Yeah, they provide all that.
Bruce.
But the other thing, nobody's taking consideration, summertime, when you have the summer, the kids there, that place is gonna have to be cleaned daily. Not weekly, daily. If not, that place would be so disgusting, you know, they'll
It'll be
rent.
back the way it was before we started.
Yeah.
cleaning.
Yeah.
So you gotta take that into consideration. So if they're saying at 250 a week, well, times that 5 days, 5 days a week, $250. Now do your figures. And then your extra rentals, and I still think that you're better off. I think the custodian probably needs to fall underneath Anthony. I hate to add another responsibility on to Anthony, but I think who to manage it would be Anthony,
And delegating.
and delegate and this and that. That way there, we don't go down the road that they're just hanging off in the room somewhere and doing nothing, that, Anthony's like, okay, we got somebody to answer to. And it's, that's my opinion. I don't know if Anthony has any opinion on that or not.
I'd contract it, see how it works.
I agree. Every place I've worked has gone to contractors.
No contract.
And you don't have to worry about somebody's on vacation.
That's exactly right.
Or anything like that.
And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, then you go back.
So what do we budget for?
Yeah,
So you budget for a full year.
Huh?
You budget for a full year, then you.
No, I understand that, but
How are we gonna budget the center for all seasons?
Oh, well, so what I would do is just budget the weekly cost in each of the facility maintenance. budget.
Yeah, but how are you
How are
gonna
you
do?
gonna keep the center for all seasons clean with the kids there?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah,
how did they do it before?
They didn't.
They
So we had to
didn't.
just pay a lot of money to have the whole place clean.
Well.
didn't you have a
I
part-time
realize-
person who was supposed to be doing things
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we hire a part-time person in the summertime to do that, or maybe that's the responsibility, maybe, that is recreation director farms out that responsibility to the council.
I'm over here thinking, I worked in restaurants where at the end of the night, we were cleaning the bathrooms, we were sweeping the floors, you were doing the little vacuum things under stuff. Your job was to clean the facility and have it turned over for the next day's staff. So it's not unheard of to be like, at the end of your shift, when your team of kids goes home, you need to clean up your area. You need to put all of these things back the way they were found.
Which is gonna be a lot of high school kids if she's hiring them out of high school, and guess how well it's gonna get cleaned.
Well, if we're paying them $15 an hour,
I mean, it's gonna
Well, they
take,
could go to McDonald's.
right, it's
Not
gonna
have
take, well, McDonald's. are
well,
gonna have to
McDonald's,
clean.
they're gonna have to do all that stuff.
The biggest thing is, it's gonna take somebody managing the employees. If you don't have somebody that can manage an employee to say, okay, you can't leave until this is done. Instead of, they can't hang around, and do nothing, you know what I'm saying? It's gotta be clean, it's gotta be
It's a
done.
management issue.
Yeah, it's 100% a management issue, and,
At this point, I don't care how we do, as long as the stuff gets clean.
clean, exactly.
So if we think it's gonna be, you wanna try it with a contractor, try it with a contractor.
But we're gonna fall back in the other problem. What are we gonna do for staffing in the summertime for the transfer station? This is where the double-headed sword is now we're back in the same boat. How are you gonna find somebody for 16 hours a week at the transfer station? That's gotta be over 18.
I think you probably, if the individual cleans and has to clean all these buildings, you're coming pretty close to a full-time job rather than have to go to the transfer station. And the problem that was before was where you split the employee, was figuring out who was gonna do what with that particular employee. It just seems like something I wouldn't wanna do. For something like cleaning, I'd wanna get it someplace and then check and make sure it was done. But to your point, those kids down there can sweep up after they don't have
Yeah.
to clean the whole thing thoroughly, but they have to pick up and clean up, which would cut down on the amount of time that contractor would have to do coming in. I don't know.
Right, or maybe in the summertime you add
Maybe you
two
do.
nights,
Yeah,
2 nights of cleaning and for the 8 weeks of the.
But you know what? That's you guys' decision. We're tired. We want to go home and go to bed.
Isn't the
Jack and I are
director
almost
there?
asleep.
The director is there.
So why can't she manage it? Or he,
But, I mean, she's brand new. I'm assuming she can.
yeah, I mean, somebody just needs to tell her what the expectations are.
As long as the place stays clean, I just don't want it to get back the way it
And
was.
I mean, any of the facilities guys might be interested.
I mean, I think we're short on facility guys.
And they have a
aren't
full-time job.
we? And they have plenty to do.
Yeah, but you know, people, if they want money, they'll work, so.
I haven't seen that in the government.
So I think where we're at this point, we'll bring back everything that we can for the January 18th select board meeting. Do we want to do anything else with budget review in the middle? Wait, pull it all together on the 18th, get our numbers to where we think they should be, and then we'll regroup right after
Get the
that.
articles written
Yep.
and then get us together again. And we can vote on the articles. And it should
All-
be end-
all rewritten.
What's our deadline on that? Isn't it the 19th? We have our select board meeting the 18th. And if everyone's supposed to vote on them before the 19th. So we need a really long select board meeting on the 18th.
Well, I would suggest that select board meeting would be only.
Some of the stuff for the warrants, they gotta make decisions on at a board meeting.
Right.
Right,
So you guys would either have to have another board meeting ahead of that, or.
I can have that stuff posted.
Yeah. Better than,
Yeah, I think that stuff should. Get the packets or the updated number Monday.
I thought we had. Why is January 19th is the deadline? Why is it because we're doing it all referendum?
Correct. Yeah, so we have to put that, we have to send the ballot off, so that we get it back in time for that.
And there's no leeway on that.
so that's what we're gonna do.
That's what we're gonna do.
Okay.
So January 18th,
What time?
6:30,
6:30?
yeah,
So that meeting, the budget committee will vote on each article and we'll vote on each article.
yes.
Does it make sense to maybe do it a little earlier?
I can't get out of
You
bed.
can-
And I,
earlier.
and I can't do a 5 o'clock again, that, this kills me for being in business, I had to get done with it early, I can't do 5 o'clock meeting.
I guess I have a question. Is there gonna be a macro number that basically says if all this stuff goes through, it's gonna be, let's say, a 14% increase?
Which, you know, Melanie's a stickler for wanting to know that before we sign off on anything. I want to know what the overall increase is going to be to the budget, what that looks like with our potential mill rate for next year. What do we have to explain to the voters? And whether or not it exceeds the LD1 limit. So that's super fun calculation.
18th, 6:30.
All
I
right,
think we can all be here. Budget committee, Scott. And I am.
I love my phone.
Tuesday. It's our regularly
It's
scheduled
been
board
such a
meeting.
pleasure.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm gonna try to get back. That's the one
That's
Barbara's
right,
having
because you're
problems
gonna be
with.
gone.
Thank you.
And your foot.
Where you came
Right.
from, I came.
You don't need to be here.
Some of us are
Either
smart.
remote
some
or
of us
person.
aren't.
Just depends on the weather.
Yeah.
I can
Can
jump
you
in.
Need a
vote?
motion to adjourn.
I was just thinking that we were just trying to figure out because the 18th is where we
Oh, right.
potentially have two conflicts. So we were just trying to figure out. So Barbara says she can be here either remotely.
But can she
Remotely.
Yeah,
vote
yeah, because
remotely?
Ricky
Yeah.
votes remotely and it's a
Yes.
medical
Okay.
issue.
All
It's
right.
only if it's like town meeting.
Okay,
Then you
all right.
can-
I was
then
gonna
your
say, I
vote
knew there
doesn't
was
count.
something where we could, okay.
And I will try to get back.
Okay.
All right, we'll take a motion
So
to adjourn.
So move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yay.
All right. Look at that. There's a quorum.
Yeah.
There's that majority we need.
Went up to-
All in favor, get up and go.
Yeah, I got
So
it.
we're good.
Well, double check
There
on
you
it.
go.
Before they get their money back, taxes on it, or they can transfer it. Sometimes you can roll over like an IRA.
Yeah.
401k, you roll over an IRA. So,
Well, you're welcome.
Hey, Nick, can you also look into the one that we use at O'Connor's? The one we use at O'Connor's is called WageWorks. They don't contribute anything to it. It's all pre-tax dollars. I pick the amount I want to put in. It's called WageWorks. And all I do is I log in, and what I do is like I go into my